In a quiet room, an old clock ticked loudly. My husband John was glued to the TV, ignoring me completely. I felt fed up with all the problems we'd had over the years. John broke the silence, sneering at me. I told him firmly, "I'm leaving." He mocked me, saying I couldn't survive without him. But his words only made me more determined. I couldn't take his neglect and his mom's meddling anymore. It was time to leave and take charge of my life. "I can handle it," I said confidently, standing up. Even though I was nervous about what was next, I felt strong. John's mom, who had been living with us for a while, walked in and saw my packed bags. "Leaving already?" she sneered, thinking I couldn't handle their family issues. I ignored her and grabbed my bags, heading for the door. John just sat there, saying, "You'll be back. You can't do this alone." As I stepped out of the house, a feeling of freedom washed over me. The evening air was refreshing, lifting my spirits. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. For 2 decades, I'd been playing the role of John's obedient wife, feeling more like a convenience than a partner. My son, Elias, was the only source of happiness, but even he couldn't fill the void in my heart. John's mom made things worse with her constant criticism and manipulation. Finding a small, peaceful apartment was a relief. It became my safe space where I could think without judgment. I ignored calls and messages from John and his mom, who begged and threatened me. I was determined to stand my ground and move forward. My coworkers at the library, where I'd worked for a long time, supported me. They had seen how I'd been struggling and were happy to see me finding my strength again. Surrounded by books and understanding friends, I started to feel like myself again and began to believe in a brighter future. While I was settling into my new life, Elias called me, sounding worried. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. I reassured him, feeling calm for the first time in years. "Yes, Elias, I'm doing better than ever." But then he told me about the problems at home. My decision to leave hadn't gone down well. John had turned to drinking, and his mom wouldn't stop blaming me for leaving. I pushed away the guilt, reminding myself that they needed to respect my decisions. Elias hesitated, but then expressed his support for me prioritizing my happiness. Ending the call, I realized this was just the beginning of proving myself to John and his mother, who had underestimated me for too long. It was time they saw I wasn't the obedient woman they thought I was. My journey to self-discovery and independence had only just begun. In my quiet new home, I reflected on the 28 years with John. What started as a promising relationship had soured over time. John's charm and our shared dreams once seemed perfect, but he became more focused on himself, neglecting our family. Elias's birth didn't bring us closer, it highlighted our growing distance. John thought providing money was enough, leaving me to handle the emotional support. His mother, Ariana, was always there, criticizing my parenting. She'd say I was spoiling Elias, insisting John never needed that kind of care. Despite her comments, I focused on raising Elias well. He grew into a thoughtful and independent man, a bright spot in our tense home. Things reached a breaking point when Ariana moved in without asking, claiming she was lonely. Her presence was suffocating. She criticized everything from my cooking to my clothes, hinting that John could have chosen a better partner. This new phase of my life was all about breaking free from years of control and finding myself again, a journey I was just beginning. Ariana's constant criticisms were hard to ignore, but what really shook me was discovering John's deception. I stumbled upon bank statements one day that revealed large amounts of money being spent from our joint account. It turned out this money was being wasted on Ariana's gambling addiction and John's secret indulgences. Whenever I tried to confront them about it, it led to heated arguments, with John always taking his mother's side. "She's my mom, Stella. She needs this," he'd insist, dismissing my concerns. The final straw came when I overheard them plotting to take full control of our finances, pushing me aside and leaving me powerless in my own home. That's when I realized I couldn't keep living under their control. The day I decided to leave, I promised myself I'd make them understand the pain they caused. My plan was simple but powerful, to challenge their egos and their control. I started by legally separating our finances, which shocked John. "What are you doing?" he demanded on the phone. "I'm protecting myself, something I should have done a long time ago," I replied calmly but firmly. Ariana's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful brat. After everything we've done for you," she screamed when she found out. But I didn't let it faze me. The time of me being submissive was over. Now I was setting my own rules, beginning their reckoning. After I took control of my finances, things got chaotic. John and Ariana showed their true colors through their anger. Their attempts to intimidate me with angry phone calls didn't work. "You think you're smart, Stella," John sneered over the phone. "You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back." "Not a chance, John. I won't let you manipulate me anymore," I shot back, standing my ground. Ariana's threats were even harsher. "You'll regret this, Stella. You've ruined our family." "There was no family to ruin, Ariana. It was all fake," I countered. Despite their threats, I felt free. The fear that used to control me was gone, replaced by a determination for justice. It was time for them to face the consequences. I started by reaching out to old friends and telling them about the lies and manipulation John and Ariana had put me through. My honest revelation spread quickly, tarnishing their once spotless reputations. John, who always cared about his social standing, was embarrassed. "How could you do this to me?" he asked me, shocked. "You did it to yourself," I replied calmly. "I'm just telling the truth." Ariana faced the community's disapproval too. "You've made us outcasts," she accused, seeing it as a fight, but I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "No, Ariana, this isn't a fight. It's about being responsible for your actions," I told her. Seeing their social circles fall apart showed how powerful the truth can be. John's supporters distanced themselves, wary of his damaged reputation, while Ariana lost influence as her gambling problem and manipulative tactics were exposed. But I didn't stop at just exposing them socially. I knew their weak spot was their finances. With the help of a good lawyer, I fought for my fair share of our joint assets. Ariana's debts from gambling and John's mishandling of money were brought to light. The legal battles were tough, but I stayed strong. Their lies were no match for the truth, and I won a significant victory in court. When the judge ruled in my favor, I could see the defeat in John and Ariana's faces. This win meant more than just money. It showed that I was morally right. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," John said, sounding defeated. "No, John, you destroyed our family long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied, leaving the courtroom feeling free for the first time in years. I was filled with hope for a future without the weight of my past. After the court ruling, I started rebuilding my life with the assets that were rightfully mine. Stepping away from John and Ariana's influence, they couldn't believe the extent of their downfall. This was the start of a new chapter for me, one of independence and self-discovery, ready to embrace whatever came my way. The crumbling of John and Ariana's facades was just the beginning of my journey to rediscover myself and pursue real happiness and freedom. One evening, John called in a fit of desperation. "You can't just change our lives like this, Stella," he pleaded over the phone. "I'm just taking back what's rightfully mine," I replied firmly. "Maybe you should have thought about the consequences before betraying my trust." Ariana, however, took a sneakier approach. She tried to turn family members against me, painting herself as the victim. "You're tearing our family apart, Stella," she accused me when we bumped into each other at the grocery store. "This family was broken long before I left," I replied, refusing to show any sign of distress. I embraced my new freedom, enjoying the ability to control my own life. I cut off their access to me by changing my phone number and found comfort in volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who have faced similar struggles. But my fight for justice wasn't over yet. I found out Ariana planned to challenge the court's decision, hoping to get money for her gambling habit. "You won't win, Stella. I'll make sure you pay," she threatened in a message sent through a relative. In defiance, I strengthened my legal defenses, prepared to counter any challenge she brought forward. The person who once avoided conflict had become a determined advocate for her own rights. Meanwhile, John was crumbling under the pressure. His once spotless reputation was now tarnished, affecting his career. "You've destroyed everything, Stella," he admitted during a moment of reflection. "You brought this on yourself, John." "I just exposed the truth," I replied. As time passed, I watched as their seemingly stable lives fell apart. Ariana's attempt to overturn the court's decision failed, leaving her in financial and social ruin. John's professional life continued to decline, his reputation irreparably damaged. However, I didn't feel any joy in watching their downfall. Though it was an important part of reclaiming myself, it didn't bring me satisfaction. My journey was about healing and finding myself, far beyond their punishment. Regaining my independence and self-respect was a big step. But the wounds from neglect and emotional abuse were still healing. As I rebuilt my life, my main goal was to find inner peace and happiness. My journey was transformative, leading me out of the darkness of my past. I became stronger and more resilient. My story wasn't about revenge, but about freedom, a celebration of the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges. Months had gone by since the court ruled in my favor, but the effects lingered. John and Ariana had drifted from their social circles, shadows of their former selves. Then Elias visited unexpectedly with troubling news. Dad lost his job and his drinking has gotten worse. Grandma lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house, he said, the weight of his words palpable. My heart ached for Elias. Despite the distance, family ties tugged at my emotions. Did we do the right thing? Elias wondered quietly. I reassured him, though with a heavy heart, that we stood up for what was right. They made their choices. I didn't find satisfaction in John and Ariana's downfall. Instead, it reminded me of the importance of living with integrity and respecting others. In the following weeks, rumors spread about the sale of their house, signaling the end of their decline. John struggled to find work because of his damaged reputation, and Ariana was isolated as her addiction became known. One evening, I ran into John during a walk. He looked like a different person, defeated. There's nothing to say, he finally said, defeated. This brief encounter was powerful. It showed how much our lives had changed because of the choices we made. It was here that I found true happiness, peace, and a sense of self that couldn't be shaken.
I guess you could say I lived a straightforward life, working for my dad's company. He built it from scratch, and it's one of those big, bustling trading firms downtown. I stuck to my job, didn't really date much. Most evenings were simple, me and Jess, my best friend since high school, hanging out. Jess? She's a whirlwind, always with a new guy on her arm. I lost count a long time ago. One Monday morning, Dad called me into his office, a rare occurrence since he liked us to handle our own corners of the business. Nellie, I want you to meet someone. This is Tom, he gestured to a man standing beside him, looking all sharp in a business suit. Tom's joining us from the West Branch. Thought you might show him the ropes. Tom stepped forward, sticking his hand out. Nice to meet you, Nellie. Heard a lot of good things. His grip was firm, his smile a bit too polished. Likewise, I replied, trying not to sound too uninterested. I was used to new faces around, but there was something about Tom that didn't sit right. Maybe it was his too smooth demeanor. As weeks turned into months, Tom and I worked closely, and his relentless charm started to chip away at my initial reservations. He'd drop by my office with a coffee just how I like it, black, no sugar, or he'd offer a casual, "Need a hand with that?" whenever I was buried under reports. Then there were the lunches. It began as group things, but somehow we'd end up splitting from the crowd, just the two of us. I wasn't sure when the shift happened, when my thoughts about him started to warm, but they did. Jess, of course, was less than thrilled. We were at her place, a cozy, cluttered apartment she never seemed to stay in long enough to clean. You're spending a lot of time with the new guy, she noted, eyebrow raised as she sipped her wine. Yeah, so? He's nice. Nicer than I thought, I defended, feeling a strange need to protect my budding feelings from her scrutiny. Nice, she mimicked, making it sound like the dirtiest word in the world. Just be careful, Nell. Guys like that, they know how to make a girl feel special, then bam, they're on to the next conquest. But I didn't listen, not really. It felt too good to have someone see me, really see me, even if it was through what Jess called charm-tinted glasses. It wasn't long before Tom asked me out properly. No work excuses, no accidental meetings. Just a straightforward, "Would you like to have dinner with me?" I said yes. I didn't think much about where it might lead. The day I said yes to Tom wasn't like in the movies. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music swelling in the background. Just a quiet yes at the little Italian place we'd made our spot. He looked like he won the lottery, and honestly, so did I. In the blur that followed, wedding planning took over. My mom, bless her heart, was all over it like white on rice, bustling around with more energy than I'd seen in years. "Nellie, darling, do you like these flowers? What about this color for the bridesmaids?" It was endless. Tom leaned back in his chair during one of the planning sessions, his eyes scanning over the catering menu. "Babe, as long as they have those little shrimp things you love, and maybe some steak, I'm good." Mom shot him a look, her hands on her hips. "Thomas, it's not just about the food. We have to think about the venue, the guest list. Speaking of which, how many are you bringing?" "Oh, just a few folks. My sister, her kids, a couple of buddies from work," Tom replied, trying to sound casual, but I caught the slight tension in his voice when he mentioned his sister. His sister, Sarah, was a single mom with twins. I hadn't met her until the wedding day, and she was as frazzled as any solo parent with two hyper 3-year-olds would be. She was nice, though, kept apologizing for the kids running around like pint-sized tornadoes. Jess, ever the firecracker, was instantly by my side when she saw me stressing over the details. "Nell, chill. It's going to be perfect. You worry too much." I laughed, nudging her with my elbow. "Easy for you to say. You just have to show up and look pretty." The wedding itself was a blur of faces, music, and dancing. I remember looking out at all the people who'd come to celebrate with us, feeling like I was in some kind of dream. Tom was right there, always within reach, his hand finding mine, his smiles just for me. After the honeymoon, which was a week of beachside bliss, reality kicked back in. We moved into the house my parents gifted us, a cozy, 2-story place with a garden that needed some love. It was ours, though, and that felt huge. One evening, after most of the boxes were unpacked, we collapsed on the sofa, a mess of takeout containers between us. "We really did it, huh?" Tom said, a goofy grin on his face as he threw an arm around me. "We did," I agreed, leaning into him. "Feels like playing house, doesn't it?" "Best kind of play," he chuckled, kissing the top of my head. "You're okay with this, right? Me working and you?" I knew what he was asking. We'd talked about it before, the idea of me being a housewife. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd want, but with Tom, it seemed right. "Yeah, I'm good with it. I want to make this a real home, you know?" "Yeah, I know." He squeezed my shoulder. "And hey, maybe soon we'll be adding a little more noise around here, huh?" I smiled at that, the thought of kids running around, filling the house with even more life. "Yeah, maybe." We sat there for a while, just enjoying each other's company, the quiet hum of our new life surrounding us. It felt right, like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Months turned into years, and that little hope of adding the sound of tiny feet running around the house started to wear me down. Every month was a cycle of hope and disappointment. It wasn't supposed to be this hard, was it? People have kids every day. Why was it different for us? I remember sitting in the doctor's office, feeling like I was about to get my report card. The room smelled like antiseptic and something floral that was probably meant to calm nerves, but just made me more anxious. "Well, Nellie," the doctor started, looking over her glasses at me after checking all the test results. "Everything seems normal. These things sometimes take time. Just keep trying, and try not to worry." Tom was trying to be supportive, but I could tell it was getting to him too. One night over dinner, he reached across the table, taking my hand. "Hey, we're in this together, okay? We're a team, right?" "Right," I agreed, but part of me wondered if I was letting him down. Jess was a whirlwind of support and blunt pep talks. "You're stressing too much. It's like trying to catch a butterfly with a net. Just chill." I rolled my eyes, though her words did ease the tension a bit. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one going through it." She waved a dismissive hand. "True. But I see you, all wound up all the time. It's not gonna help you get pregnant." The conversation shifted when Jess dropped her own bombshell a few weeks later. We were at a cafe, the smell of coffee strong in the air. She had that look, like she was sitting on a secret. Finally, she blurted it out, her eyes gleaming. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, everything stopped. The cafe noise faded into the background, and I felt a mix of joy and an inexplicable sting. Jess, that's amazing," I managed, my voice brighter than I felt. "Yeah, it's kinda crazy, right? I mean, I wasn't even trying," she added, then winced, realizing how her words might sound to me. "Who's the dad?" I asked, genuinely curious, despite the ache in my chest. She shrugged, her expression unreadable. "Just some guy. You don't know him. Anyway, we're not together or anything. It's just me and this little bean." I nodded, the news settling in. I was happy for her, really. But it was a stark reminder of what I didn't have. As we talked more, her excitement infectious, I felt my own worries slip away, replaced by something like hope. Maybe not all paths were straight. Maybe some had detours that still led to beautiful places. The months after Jess had her baby boy were a whirl of emotions. I visited her as soon as she was settled back home, carrying the plush, overpriced baby blanket I'd picked out, something soft enough for royalty. Jess seemed overwhelmed but happy, a tired smile permanently etched on her face. "God, Nellie, it's insane. I barely have time to shower, let alone host visits," she confessed as we sat on her cluttered couch, her new baby cradled in her arms. "I totally get it," I reassured her, trying not to feel sidelined. "Just know I'm here, whenever you need a break or just want to scream into a pillow." Back at home, things were different. Tom's weekend trips to help his sister, Sarah, with her twins, became more frequent. Every time he packed up for another visit, I offered to come along. "Let me help, it'll be fun. The kids are great," I'd suggest, trying to sound cheerful. "Nah, you don't need to deal with all that chaos. I got it," he'd insist, shutting down the conversation before it could grow. "Sarah's going through a lot. I just want to be there for her, you know?" So, I stayed back, filled the silence of our home with new projects. I bought gifts for the twins, soft toys, and books, things I hoped would make their days brighter. "Give these to the kids," I'd tell Tom, handing over the brightly wrapped packages. "Sure thing, babe. They'll love this," he'd say, packing them away in his overnight bag. One Saturday, with Tom away supposedly buried in kid duty, I headed to the mall to pick up some new tablecloths and napkins for our home. Something to brighten up the place. As I walked through the aisles, picking through patterns and fabrics, a familiar laugh caught my attention. There, in the middle of the mall, was Sarah, her twins tugging at each corner of her purse, none the worse for wear. Surprised, I approached them, my heart starting to race for reasons I couldn't pin down. "Sarah, what a surprise!" I exclaimed, perhaps a little too loudly. "Nellie, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you." Sarah beamed, herding her kids closer. "We're just picking up some school supplies." We decided to grab coffee at a small cafe inside the mall. As we settled down, the kids distracted with some coloring books, I ventured cautiously. "So, Tom's been a big help on the weekends, huh?" Sarah's face clouded with confusion. "Tom? Oh, he hasn't been over in months. Things have been crazy, and he's busy, you know. We mostly just text." Her words hit me like a slap. "Oh, but he's there now, right? Helping out?" My voice was thin, hopeful. "No, haven't seen him." "Is everything okay, Nellie?" Sarah's concern was genuine, but it only twisted the knife deeper. I nodded, pasting on a smile. "Yeah, all good. Must have misunderstood his plans." We chatted a bit longer, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing, piecing together the lies. He wasn't with his sister. He hadn't been for a long time. Where was he? What was he doing? The drive home was a blur. I kept telling myself to breathe, to not let panic take over. But inside, my world was crumbling. The trust I'd had, the life we'd built, it all felt like a house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest touch. The house was too quiet, the silence echoing off the walls like a bad omen. I needed answers. I needed to know if my instincts, now screaming betrayal, were right. Tom's office was at the end of the hallway, a space where he spent his evenings working, or so he said. I walked over to his desk, my hands slightly trembling as I contemplated where to start looking. His laptop sat there, closed but not asleep, its power light pulsing softly. I opened the laptop, hesitating for a moment before I typed in the password. He'd told me once, carelessly, not thinking I'd ever have a reason to use it. The screen lit up, revealing his cluttered desktop filled with folders and documents. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe a receipt, an email, anything that could explain the sinking feeling in my gut. I clicked through folders, finding nothing but work files and boring reports. My hope was dwindling, replaced by frustration and a growing sense of foolishness. Maybe I was overreacting. But then, I noticed a folder tucked away at the bottom of the screen, labeled simply Miscellaneous. It was a strange place for such a folder, hidden among spreadsheets and business plans. Curiosity piqued, I opened it. There were photos. My breath caught as I clicked on the first image. It was Tom, and there, far too close, was Jess. A passionate, intimate kiss that you don't share with just anyone. And in another, he was holding her baby, looking down at him with a tenderness he'd never shown even in our talks of having our own. I felt cold, frozen in place as the truth settled in. My husband was cheating on me. With Jess. The world seemed to tilt, a vertigo of betrayal spinning me around. I needed to hear his voice, needed to know what he'd say. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. He picked up almost immediately. "Hey, babe." Tom's voice was casual, too casual. "What's up? Where are you?" I managed to say, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "Oh, just at Sarah's. Helping her with the kids. You know how it is," he replied smoothly. A child's scream cut through the background, lending credence to his lie. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur. When Tom came home, he was the picture of a loving husband, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I acted the part of the none the wiser wife, but inside, I was reeling, planning, thinking of my next steps. By Monday, I had made up my mind. I called a private detective, a number given by a friend who had gone through something similar. We met at a coffee shop, a public place where I could keep my composure. "I need to know everything," I told him, my voice low. "Can you do that?" He nodded, his expression grave. "It'll take a couple of weeks. I'll get you everything you need to know." I went home to play the part of the trusting wife a little longer, the weight of my secret knowledge pressing down on me like a physical burden. 2 agonizing weeks of playing the doting wife finally culminated on a crisp Saturday morning. Tom had left early, his bag packed for another weekend at his sister's. I was nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee when the call came. It was the detective, his voice low and even. "I have the results," he said. "Can we meet?" "There's a cafe downtown, quiet enough for a conversation." "See you there," I said, already heading upstairs to get dressed. The drive to the cafe was a blur, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios. What would the evidence show? Was there a chance, any chance at all, that I was wrong about Tom? Those hopes were dashed the moment the detective laid the photographs on the table between us. There was Tom and Jess, not just together, but intimate, affectionate. The detective's voice was a steady stream, but I only caught pieces, lost in the visual proof of betrayal. "And here are the invoices," he was saying, sliding another batch of papers across to me. "About $35,000 in total. All paid to cover medical expenses for the delivery. His name is on the receipts." Back home, I went straight to our bedroom. The closet was full of Tom's clothes, his scent, his presence. With a grim determination, I pulled out suitcases and began packing. Every shirt, every pair of jeans, every sock, I removed them from my life with a meticulousness that was almost surgical. Once everything was packed, I called a courier service. "I have a few items that need immediate delivery," I told them, my voice flat. The address I gave was Jess's. With his belongings gone, my next step was to secure my sanctuary. I called a locksmith and had all the locks in the house changed. No trace of Tom was left accessible, not even a way in. Feeling both emptied and resolute, I drove to my parents' house. My mother opened the door, her expression turning from surprise to concern in an instant. "Mom, I need to talk to both of you," I said as I walked in, my father appearing in the hallway behind her. In the living room, I laid everything out, the photos, the receipts, the betrayal. My father's face grew dark with each revelation, his disappointment palpable. "You need to divorce him, Nellie," he said, his voice firm. "He's not the man we thought he was." "I've already started the process," I replied, pulling out the divorce papers from my bag. I needed you to know." Mom reached out, her hand covering mine. "We're here for you, darling. Whatever you need." That evening, as the sky darkened and a quiet settled over my parents' home, my phone began to light up relentlessly. First, it was Tom, his calls coming in one after another. When I didn't answer, the buzzing switched to texts. "Babe, why is the door locked? My key won't work. What's going on?" I stared at the screen, feeling a hollow satisfaction in ignoring him. Then Jess started calling. I didn't need to pick up to know why. Confusion, betrayal, a messy mix of emotions that I no longer cared to understand. It was late when I heard the car pull up. The sound of a door slamming was followed by urgent footsteps up the driveway. Tom didn't bother to knock, he burst through the front door, his face flushed with anger and confusion. "What's this about, Nellie? Why are my things at Jess's? Why can't I get into my own house?" His voice was loud, too loud, filling the space with a palpable tension. I was sitting in the living room with my parents. I stood slowly, meeting his gaze with a calm I didn't feel. "How do you know your things are with Jess? Weren't you supposed to be at your sister's all weekend?" Tom's face went pale, his eyes darting around as if looking for an exit or an excuse. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Dad stood up, his presence commanding. "You've been lying, Tom. To my daughter, to all of us. I trusted you, thought of you as a son, even wanted to make you a successor to my business." Tom's eyes widened, realizing the gravity of his situation. "I can explain." "What?" "Explain how you planned to take half of what I built. How you were using my daughter. We know everything, Tom. The detective provided recordings of your conversations with Jess. Planning your future with her, at the expense of your marriage." Tom sank to his knees, his hands clasped in front of him. "Nellie, please, I'm sorry. It meant nothing, I swear. It was just a mistake." I felt my mom's hand on my shoulder, her touch reassuring. I looked down at the man I had once loved, now just a stranger groveling on my parents' floor. Just a mistake that costs $35,000 and a betrayal? I asked, the disgust in my voice clear. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught." Reaching into the folder I had brought with me, I pulled out the divorce papers, holding them out to him. "Here. I want you out of my life, for good." Tom reached for the papers, his hand shaking. He stood, the fight gone from him, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Before he could leave, Dad stepped forward, his voice booming. "And you're fired, Tom. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the financial repercussions of your actions." A few days after the confrontation with Tom, I was sitting in the quiet of my new morning routine when my phone rang. The screen flashed Jess's name, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But I needed to face this part of my past too, if I was ever going to move forward. "What's this about a lawsuit, Nellie?" Jess's voice was sharp, tinged with disbelief as soon as I picked up. "Yes, I filed for financial compensation. For the betrayal," I replied, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "Nellie, come on, can't we talk about this? You know I've always been here for you." "Here for me? Jess, you betrayed me at the deepest level. Talking isn't going to change what you did," I said, feeling a bitter edge creep into my words. As silence filled the brief gap, I heard her breathe heavily. "I always knew it," she finally hissed. "You think you're so perfect with your perfect little life. I was always in your shadow, always the second choice to every guy. You have everything, and I have nothing." Jess, feeling inferior doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's lives. "I'm sorry you felt that way, but it doesn't justify what you did," I replied, my voice cold and distant now. I hung up, cutting off any further venom she might have spewed. The lawsuit went to court, and it was as messy and painful as I had anticipated. But in the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Tom and Jess were ordered to pay a significant sum in damages. It wasn't about the money, no amount could undo the betrayal, but it was about acknowledgement, about seeing some semblance of justice. Word got around, as it always does in small towns. I heard from mutual friends that Tom had indeed married Jess, but the marriage crumbled just as quickly when he discovered her child wasn't his. The irony of it all would have been laughable if it hadn't been so tragic. Tom tried to reach out once, a feeble attempt to apologize or explain, perhaps looking for some absolution I wasn't ready to give. I didn't need his explanations anymore. His actions had spoken more clearly than his words ever could. He ended up drifting from one low-paying job to another, his once promising career in shambles. As for Jess, life had become a struggle, raising her child alone without the affluent lifestyle she had tried to secure by betraying me. I sometimes wondered if she regretted her decisions, if the harsh reality of her actions had finally sunk in. Through it all, I learned about resilience. I learned that the foundations you build in your life, the people you choose to trust, and the decisions you make, both good and bad, shape the path you walk. I was rebuilding mine, with each day bringing a little more strength, a little more hope. Let me tell you a bit about us. My name's Eleanor, and I've been married to Thomas for many years. We've got 2 kids, Ava, our oldest, and James, the youngest. Living with us, you'd see right away how different the air is between them. I was a stay-at-home mom, see, 'cause Thomas did all right by us, made enough so I could focus on the kids. "Mom, where's my blue notebook? I swear I left it right here," Ava would shout down from her room, always losing things, but managing to keep her life more organized than a planner. "Check under your bed." I'd yell back, knowing her room like the back of my hand. Ava, she was sharp as a tack, went off to college on a scholarship and never looked back. Didn't cost us a dime for her schooling. Now James, that boy was another story. Thomas, God bless him, loved that boy a bit too much. Favored him, you know? Always in his corner, even when he messed up, which was more often than not. "James, you need to take life a bit more seriously," I remember telling him one evening at dinner. He just rolled his eyes, fork halfway to his mouth. "Come on, Eleanor, the boy will find his way. He's young. Let him have some fun," Thomas chimed in, always the peacemaker. "Mom, Dad's right. I'm just trying to figure things out," James would say, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the irritation there, clear as day. He was good at making you feel like you were the one seeing things wrong. Ava was different. When she moved out, got her job, and started her life, she never asked for a penny. Proud of her, I was. "I made sure to budget, Mom. I don't want to be a bother," she'd tell me over the phone, and my heart would swell with pride. Meanwhile, James seemed to think our pockets were as deep as the ocean. "Hey, can I get some cash?" Going out with the guys, he'd drop casually, like he was talking about the weather. "It's not a bank, James." What happened to the job hunt? I'd press, trying not to let the frustration bleed through. "Jobs suck, Mom. I'm still looking for the right fit," he'd grumble, always with an excuse. Thomas and I would go back and forth about it. "He's just lost, Eleanor. He'll settle down," he'd assure me, but the worry lines etched deeper with each passing day. I'd sit there, coffee in hand, morning light streaming through the window, wondering where we went wrong. Was it too much love? Not enough tough love? James had set his sights on a prestigious college right out of high school, a place in a neighboring city known for its academic rigor. The fact that the college was expensive seemed to bother him less than it should. Thomas and I were roped into paying not just for his tuition, but also for a rented apartment where he could stay while attending classes. It was a big financial strain, but Thomas believed it was all worth it for our son's future. "My studies are going great," James would assure us over the phone, his voice always upbeat. "You guys don't need to worry about a thing," he'd add, and Thomas would nod, satisfied, passing on the latest cheerful update. But as months turned into a year and then another, the details were sparse. We got snippets of his life, a mention of a test here, a group project there, but never anything concrete. No grades, no reports, nothing that actually showed how he was doing. It started off like any other Tuesday. I was busy with the laundry, thinking about what to make for dinner, when something nagged at me, a mother's intuition, you might call it. James had been at the university for 2 years now, but we hardly got any updates. No report cards, no calls from professors, nothing. Just monthly calls asking for money. "Thomas, don't you think it's odd? We never see any grades from James," I mentioned one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. Thomas, always the optimist, just shrugged it off. "He's probably just busy, Ellie. You know how college can be." The next morning, I drove down to the university. It was a nice place, all ivy-covered buildings, and young folks looking like they had their whole lives sorted out. I headed straight for the dean's office to get the lowdown on how James was doing. "Hi, I'm Eleanor, James Carter's mother. I'd like to hear about how he's doing," I said to the lady at the front desk. She typed something into her computer, frowned, and then typed some more. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but it appears there's been a mistake. According to our records, James hasn't been enrolled here for the past 7 months." I felt like the floor dropped away from beneath me. "What do you mean? Can you check again, please?" She showed me the screen, and there it was in plain black and white. James had dropped out. Just like that. My heart was pounding as I thanked her and walked out, my mind racing all the way to James's apartment. When I got there, the place was a mess. Looked like the aftermath of a tornado. Beer cans, pizza boxes, clothes all over the place. And there, on the couch, was James, sleeping like a baby in the middle of the day. "James!" I shouted, louder than I intended. He jolted awake, all bleary-eyed and confused. "Mom? What are you doing here?" he mumbled, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. "I went to your college today. They told me you dropped out. Why didn't you tell us, James?" He looked away, then back at me. "I was gonna, I swear. Just, things got out of hand, and..." "Out of hand? James, we've been sending you money every month. Your father works hard for that money. And here you are, throwing parties and lying to us?" He tried to say something, then stopped. His eyes couldn't meet mine. "I'm sorry, Mom. I messed up." I left his apartment with my heart heavy and my mind in turmoil. That night, I told Thomas everything. He was upset, more than I'd seen him in years, but he didn't want to give up on James. "We'll get him back on track," he said, always believing there was a way to fix things. 5 long years rolled by just like that, filled with the same old song and dance. Ava, my daughter, she's the type to grab life by the horns. Worked her fingers to the bone, climbed that career ladder fast and never looked back. Saved every penny she could with her fiancé, Mike, and when it came time for them to tie the knot, they did it all on their own. It was a beautiful, modest ceremony, just like Ava. No fuss, all class. Then there's James. Still out there, floating like a leaf in the wind, looking for himself, as Thomas likes to say. He hopped from one job to another, all thanks to Thomas's buddies giving him chances he never quite caught hold of. After Ava's wedding, which James attended with a bored look plastered across his face most of the time, he dropped a bombshell on us. He was getting married too, and oh, you should have seen the girl he brought home. Lisa, her name was, and she was as sharp as a marble. Selfish? Sure. But James was smitten, or so he claimed. I wasn't too keen on her, to be honest. "James, are you sure about this one?" I asked him one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "Mom, Lisa's great, you just gotta get to know her better," he shot back, all defensive like I was attacking him. And just like that, they planned a wedding that could have been mistaken for a royal affair. Of course, they expected Thomas to foot the bill, which he did without even batting an eye. "Thomas, can we talk?" I cornered him one evening after the plans were underway. "What's on your mind, Ellie?" he asked, though I could tell he already knew. "It's this wedding, Thomas. And everything else we keep paying for James. When is enough, enough?" I was nearly at my wit's end. "He's our son, Ellie. We can't just cut him off," Thomas sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know he's our son, but look at Ava. She never asked for a dime. Worked for everything she has. Doesn't that tell you something?" I could feel my voice rising, frustration boiling over. "Eleanor, we've been over this. James is different. He needs more help," he said, his tone final, leaving no room for arguments. And so, the wedding happened. It was as grand as they come, leaving Thomas and me with a lighter wallet and me with a heavier heart. No sooner had the wedding bell stopped ringing than James was asking for more, this time an apartment and a monthly allowance to boot. "Can you believe that? After all we've done already?" I vented to Thomas one night. "He's trying to start a new life with Lisa. They need our support," Thomas tried to justify, always the peacemaker. "Support, Thomas? It's like we're funding a never-ending party for him," I snapped, unable to hold back my dismay. Despite my protests, Thomas went ahead and bought them an apartment. The monthly check started flowing soon after. Every time I signed one of those checks, a part of me wilted. I loved my son, God knows I do, but this was getting to be too much. Ava managed. Why can't he? I muttered under my breath every time I sealed an envelope. Life trudged on like this, me simmering with every check, every call for more money. Thomas and I had more than a few rounds about it. "He'll settle down, Ellie, just you wait and see," he'd always say. But me? I wasn't too sure anymore. Something had to give, and I was beginning to worry it might be us. The day Thomas died was the day part of me died too. He was gone, just like that, a heart attack right in the middle of his workday. Nobody saw it coming. It hit me like a freight train, one minute he was there, the next, just a memory. I was shattered, barely holding the pieces together. Ava was my rock through it all. She took charge the way she always does, organizing the funeral, handling the calls, managing everything so I could just breathe. Or at least try to. I couldn't have gotten through those days without her. James? Well, he was another story. Showed up to his father's funeral looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Stood there with a face like he was waiting for a bus, not a tear in sight. And Lisa was right there beside him in a black dress that was anything but appropriate, eyes glued to her phone like it was just another day. The funeral was a blur, but I remember the weight of their stares, the whispers. It wasn't right. When everyone had left, the air thick with condolences and the scent of lilies, that's when James decided to stir up more trouble. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's property. I'm the heir. He always said so," James declared, his voice too loud for the somber mood of the house. I felt a rush of anger so fierce it nearly choked me. "James, this is neither the time nor the place," I snapped, my voice cracking under the strain. Lisa piped up then, her tone sharp. "Well, it's not just about the money. We're thinking about moving in here. Take charge, you know?" Before I knew it, she was walking around the living room, touching this, moving that, as if she owned the place already. "Some of these old things will have to go, of course." I stood there, stunned, watching her parade around my home. "Over my dead body, you will. This is my house," I finally burst out. Lisa laughed, a nasty, grating sound. "Well, that's only temporary, isn't it?" The room spun a little at her words. Ava stepped in then, her voice calm but firm. "Let's all take a step back. We can sit down in a few days and discuss everything like adults." But James wouldn't have it. No, we need to sort this now. Dad would have wanted me to have it sorted quickly. Ava looked at me, her eyes full of worry, and I knew she was in this fight with me. But standing there, in the echo of my husband's last footsteps through our home, my energy was fading fast. Fine. We'll talk about it now if we must, I said, the room going quiet. I've decided I'm moving into a nursing home. Thomas and I had it picked out long ago. James whipped out his phone and pulled up the website of the nursing home. After scrolling for a bit, he looked up, shaking his head. This place is a money pit, Mom. You're not wasting your savings living there. You'll live with us in this house. His wife made a face like she'd just bitten into a lemon, but then smoothed it over with a phony smile. Of course, you can stay with us. I mean, you'll help around with cooking and cleaning, right? The words stung, but before I could react, Ava leaned in close and whispered something in my ear. Her words were a quiet bombshell, one I couldn't believe at first. But she was serious, her eyes telling me to just trust her. Taking a deep breath, I straightened up and addressed them all. Actually, I won't be needing any inheritance. Ava and I have made our plans. I'll stay with her for now. Ava nodded, adding firmly, and I don't want any part of the inheritance either. We'll go to the notary tomorrow to make it official. James and Lisa exchanged a quick, greedy glance before breaking into wide grins. Well, if that's what you want, Mom, James said, barely concealing his delight. Lisa practically skipped to the kitchen to pop open a bottle of champagne. While they were celebrating in the next room, I slipped away to pack my things, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. Ava was right beside me, helping to fold clothes and pack up my life in quiet solidarity. The next morning, Ava and I went to the notary. James and Lisa were already there, looking smug. We signed all the necessary papers. James could barely contain his glee, thinking he had won the lottery. Back at Ava's place, her husband, Mike, had prepared a warm welcome. The table was set with a good lunch and tea, making me feel cherished and safe. Mike gave me a comforting hug. Glad to have you here, he said, his smile genuine and warm. Living with Ava and Mike had been a balm to my worn spirit. Day by day, I found pieces of myself that had been lost in the chaos of grief and family drama. Ava was ever the caretaker, making sure I was comfortable, offering a listening ear, and just being there, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing so much. It was on a sunny Thursday morning, while I was enjoying a cup of coffee in the garden, that my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, and I hesitated before answering. Hello, Eleanor? This is Janet from Pine Grove Care Home. The voice was warm and professional. I'm calling to inform you that your place here is ready for you. I furrowed my brow, confusion washing over me. I think there's been a mistake. I didn't book a place at any care home. Oh, no mistake, ma'am. Your husband, Thomas, arranged for 2 lifetime places here in your name. Since his place is now vacated, you also have an option to receive a refund. The amount would be $200,000. My hand trembled as I held the phone, tears welling up in my eyes. Thomas had always been thoughtful, but this? This was beyond anything I could have imagined. Thank you, I managed to choke out, overwhelmed by his love even in his absence. I hung up and stared out at the garden, the flowers blooming with no care of the world's troubles, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. Ava noticed my tears when she came out to join me. Mom, what's wrong? Who was that on the phone? She asked, her voice laced with concern. I wiped my eyes, looking up at her. That was the nursing home. Your father, he had made arrangements for us before he died. There's enough money for me to decide what I want to do without worrying. Ava sat down next to me, taking my hand in hers. That's amazing, Mom. But you know you don't have to go if you don't want to. You can stay here with us. We want you here. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her and Mike's generosity. I know, darling. And I appreciate it more than words can say. But your father chose that place with care, thinking of our health and future. They have excellent medical facilities, and honestly, it might be the best place for me to be. I think he'd want me to use it. We spent the rest of the day looking into what Pine Grove had to offer. It was one of the best in the state, with top-notch care, beautiful grounds, and plenty of activities. It wasn't just a nursing home, it was a community where I could thrive, not just survive. Looks like Dad really was thinking ahead, Ava remarked as we browsed through the photos of the facility online. He always did, didn't he? Always making sure we were okay, I replied, a small smile creeping through the tears. We decided to visit Pine Grove the following week, to see everything in person and make the arrangements if everything felt right. As we planned, I felt a strange peace settling over me, the kind that had been elusive since Thomas passed. It was a crisp morning, and the air in Ava's house was filled with a mix of cardboard and anticipation as we packed my belongings. That's when the peace was shattered by James and Lisa barging in, papers in hand and fury in their eyes. "Mom, you've got to listen, this is serious." James was red-faced, waving documents like they were flags. I motioned for him to calm down. "James, take a breath and explain what's going on," I said, trying to keep the room from spinning into chaos. "It's Dad's loans, Mom. He took out loans for my wedding, the apartment, all secured against the house. And now, the bank wants their money." His voice was shrill, the panic clear in his eyes. Lisa chimed in, her voice shrill. "There's no money left, Eleanor. You and Ava played us. Now they want to take everything." I couldn't help but smile, not out of amusement, but because of the absurdity of it all. "Your father was a wise man, James. He invested in a nursing home for our future. Everything is in my name. As for the house, well, that's your inheritance now." James's face went from red to white. "You need to give up that nursing spot, give us the money. We need it to cover these debts." Lisa was nearly hysterical. "I took out loans for my surgery to look good for James. You owe us that money to help." Ava stood beside me, her demeanor calm but firm. "The debts aren't Mom's concern, James. She signed over the house to you. That was your choice." I looked at both of them, my voice steady. "I think you should consider selling the apartment you got as a gift. It could cover your debts." "No. We plan to rent it out, make some income." James spat back, his desperation palpable. I shrugged, feeling a weight lift as I finally let go of the burden. "Well, that's your decision, James. But as for me, I'm done. The house, the debts, you wanted the inheritance, it's all yours now." James looked like he was about to explode, and Lisa was no better, screeching about her financial woes until Mike stepped in, his voice thunderous. "Enough. You can't come here and threaten my family. Get out." Mike's presence was enough to push James and Lisa out the door, their threats and shouts fading as they left. Ava closed the door behind them, her hand resting on the knob for a moment as if to seal away the chaos. I let out a long breath, feeling the final ties of obligation fall away. Ava looked at me, a mixture of concern and relief in her eyes. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I am, darling. More than okay," I assured her, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm free of the house and the debts. Free of the constant demands. Your father's foresight gave me this freedom, and I'm going to enjoy it without guilt." We spent the rest of the day wrapping up my belongings, each item a memory, each box a step toward my new life. As I packed, I thought about Thomas, his last gift to me, freedom and peace. I was ready for the nursing home, ready for a community of my peers, ready to embrace whatever came next without the shadow of James's problems looming over me. Settling into the nursing home was like starting a new chapter of my life, one I never knew I needed. My apartment here at Pine Grove is more beautiful than I could have imagined. From my window, I can see the sprawling gardens, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets I'm now free to discover. It's funny, really, how life turns out. Just a few months ago, I was tangled up in family drama, worried sick about debts and inheritances. Now, I'm here, in this peaceful haven, hearing about the outside world as if it's a distant memory. One sunny afternoon, Ava came by for our usual walk in the park that borders the nursing home. These walks have become the highlight of my week. "So, how are things back home? How's Mike?" I asked as we strolled along the paved path, admiring the blooming flowers. "Mike's great, Mom. He's really been a rock through all this. And we've got some news. I'm pregnant." Ava beamed, her face glowing with joy. My heart swelled with happiness. "Oh, Ava, that's wonderful. I'm going to be a grandma." I hugged her, feeling an excitement I hadn't felt in ages. As we walked, we talked about her plans, about how she wanted to raise her child, and the laughter we'd share. It was a beautiful feeling, looking forward to life again. "And what about James? Heard from him lately?" I ventured gently, knowing that part of my heart was still tender where he was concerned. Ava sighed. "Yeah, I heard from a mutual friend. He and Lisa sold the apartment and the house to cover their debts. After everything was paid off, Lisa left him. Now he's living in a small rental and had to finally get a job." Sounds like he's learning some hard lessons," I said, not without a pinch of sadness for the son I once held in my arms, thinking the world was his oyster. "It's probably for the best, Mom. He's taking responsibility for himself now. It's what you always hoped for, right?" Ava squeezed my hand as we paused to watch a pair of ducks glide across the pond. "That's true, darling. I always did want him to stand on his own 2 feet. Maybe now he'll find his way," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and resignation. It was hard not to worry, but at least he was making his own path now. Ava changed the topic then, talking about the nursery she was planning, the colors and themes swirling in her creative mind. We laughed and planned, and for a while, I forgot all about the troubles of the past. Living in Pine Grove, I found a community that feels like family. We share stories, play games, and support each other. The staff here are wonderful, always making sure we're comfortable and cared for. It's more than I could have hoped for, and sometimes, I catch myself wishing Thomas could see me now, happy, at peace, and about to be a grandmother. My name's Erica. If you asked me how I started, I'd say with nothing fancy, just a girl from a regular family, with parents who loved me more than anything. My life was pretty standard until I hit college, where I met Jack. He was in the same restaurateur program, and man, did we click. We were both dreamers, aiming to carve out a little empire of our own. "Ever think about opening your own place, Erica?" Jack asked one night as we were cramming for finals over cheap coffee and day-old donuts. All the time, I admitted, not taking my eyes off the business plan spread across the table. "Imagine a cozy little spot, authentic Italian, the kind of place where everyone feels like family." Jack grinned, his eyes lighting up. "We could do it, you know. Run it together. What's stopping us?" "Money," I sighed, a laugh escaping despite the truth of it. "Loads and loads of money. But life has a funny way of turning dreams into reality. When my parents passed away suddenly, a brutal car crash that took them too soon, they left me their house and a tidy sum of $400,000. After the grief, the silence of the house was overwhelming. It was Jack who stepped up. "Let's do it, Erica. Let's make your dream come true. For you, for them," he said one evening as we sat in the quiet living room, surrounded by memories. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling the weight of the decision. "It's a huge risk." Jack took my hands in his. "I'm in if you're in, all the way." With that, we got married right after graduation and poured every dime and ounce of energy into our first restaurant. I designed the interiors myself, choosing warm yellows and reds, and we both developed the menu, testing recipes until midnight most days. The first few years were tough, no lie. There were nights I fell into bed with my shoes still on, too tired to move. But seeing our dream take shape, watching the 3 restaurants flourish under our care, made every aching muscle worth it. "Mom, why are you always at the restaurant?" my son, Danny, asked one day. He was about 7, his face serious as only a kid's can be. "Because it's our family's place, sweetheart. We built it so we could have a good life, you know? I explained as I tied my apron, preparing for another long shift. But you're always working, he pouted, and it stung because he was right. I know, kiddo. But I promise, we're doing this for us, for our future. One day, you'll see it was worth it, I said, kissing his forehead before rushing out the door, the bell jingling behind me. After years of what seemed like marital bliss and bustling restaurant nights, I started noticing the cracks. Jack and I weren't the dream team we used to be. He was pulling away, distant, like he was always somewhere else even when he was right there. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was doing the books in the office when Jack walked in, late again, his jacket slung carelessly over one shoulder. Jack, we need to talk about the Henderson event. They want to book the big room, and I can't make that call without you, I said, trying to catch his eye as he rifled through some mail. Yeah, sure, whatever you think is best, he muttered, not looking up. That was his new thing, agreeing without listening. It drove me nuts. Jack, I snapped, louder this time. This is important. Can you please focus? He finally looked at me, his eyes tired, or maybe just uninterested. Erica, I trust your judgment. Just handle it, okay? I've got a lot on my mind. That was another thing. What exactly was on his mind these days? I used to know every thought he had. Now? Not so much. One night, I just couldn't take the guessing games anymore. We were in bed, the only time we ever were in the same room it seemed, and I turned to him, my voice shaky but needing the truth. Jack, is there someone else? The words felt like broken glass coming out of my mouth. He was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that tells you everything you don't want to hear. Yeah, there is, he said finally, his voice flat. No anger, no sorrow, just cold, hard fact. It just happened. We've changed. I've changed. You've changed. It's not just one thing. The next day was a blur. I moved through the motions at the restaurant, smiling at customers, checking on orders, all while feeling like I was outside my body, looking down at some stranger living my life. When I finally got home, Jack was there, sitting at the kitchen table with that look on his face, the one that used to mean he had something serious to say. Erica, I think we should talk about what this means for us, he said, as I dropped my keys on the counter, not ready to sit, not ready to hear it. What's there to talk about, Jack? You've made your choice, I said, my voice cold, steadier than I felt. We should get a divorce. There's nothing left to salvage. He didn't argue with that. Maybe he wanted to, or maybe he was just as tired as I was. Tired of pretending, tired of hiding, tired of whatever we had become. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers and dividing up the life we had built together. I kept the house and half of everything else. It was fair, I suppose, but it felt like paying a huge price for a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. That's the thing about building something with someone, it becomes so intertwined that tearing it apart leaves everything looking a bit frayed, a bit worn, a shadow of what it used to be. Starting over is like standing on a cliff edge, the fear of the drop, but also the thrill of the unknown. After Jack, I spent a lot of time figuring things out, getting the restaurants running smooth without him, and just being alone. It wasn't bad, not really. Gave me time to think, to breathe. But then, like a cliché in some corny romance novel, Tom walked into my life, a lawyer with a killer smile that probably won too many cases on charm alone. He came into the restaurant one busy Friday night, his little girl, Emily, in tow. They were hard to miss, she had the same bright laugh as her dad. A glass of your house red for me, and a lemonade for the little miss, Tom smiled at me, not knowing I owned the place. I was filling in for the hostess that night, just trying to keep busy. Throughout the night, I kept catching glimpses of them from the corner of my eye, him explaining bits of the menu to her, her listening so intently like the world depended on it. It was adorable. Made me miss having that kind of simple interaction, which had become so rare in my life. As they were leaving, Tom stopped by the register where I was cashing out another customer. Thanks for a wonderful dinner, he said. The food was excellent, and so was the service. Glad you enjoyed it, I replied, handing the receipt to the customer before turning to give Tom my full attention. And your company seemed pretty top-notch too. That was the beginning of everything. Tom started coming around more often, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. We'd chat, casual at first, then deeper conversations as the weeks turned into months. He was different, thoughtful, and real. One evening, he closed his menu and leaned back in his chair, watching me as I wiped down the counter. Erica, would you like to go out sometime? I mean, outside of this place? I paused, cloth in hand, not sure if I was ready. Like a date? Yeah, a date, he smiled, looking a bit nervous himself. As things started getting serious with Tom, I knew it was time for him to meet my boys, Danny and Sam. I won't lie, I was nervous about how they'd take to him. They'd had a rough time after their dad and I split up, and bringing someone new into our lives felt huge. One Saturday, I decided to throw a small barbecue at our place. Casual, no pressure. Tom came over with Emily, and right off, I could see the boys were sizing him up, a bit standoffish at first, which was expected. Tom, bless his heart, didn't push it. He tossed a football to Danny. Hey champ, think you can teach me a few tricks? Danny, a natural athlete, lit up at the chance to show off his skills. Sure, but only if you can keep up, he shot back with a grin. Sam, quieter and more into his books, hung back a bit. Tom noticed and wandered over to him later with a comic book in hand. Heard you're the expert on these. Think you could explain the multiverse theory to me? It's way over my head. Sam's eyes, usually glued to his tablet, looked up, surprised and a bit impressed. Sure, I can do that. Watching them talk, seeing Tom genuinely interested in what Sam had to say, it eased my heart. And Emily, she was a gem, trying to include Sam in the conversation, showing off her own collection of superhero stickers. Just when I thought I had left all the drama behind and could finally get some peace with Tom and the kids, my past came knocking, or rather, ringing, on my day off. I was in the middle of making lunch when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Jack. My heart sank a bit, not ready to hear whatever he had to say. Erica, you're not going to believe this, but I'm suing you, Jack's voice chirped through the speaker, too cheerful for the words he was spitting out. You got more than your fair share in the divorce, and I've been talking to some very good lawyers, my new father-in-law's picking up the tab. We're going to make sure I get what I deserve, which is a lot more than what I walked away with. My head was spinning. You've got to be kidding me. We split everything fair and square. You agreed to it. Yeah, well, I've changed my mind. You don't deserve the good life, Erica. Not after how boring and ugly you turned out. I'm going to make sure you pay for it, he sneered, and I could almost see the smug look on his face. I couldn't hold back the tears. They started to fall, hot and fast, as the shock turned to anger, then hurt. Tom walked in right then, his face clouding over when he saw me. Babe, what's wrong? Who was that on the phone? It was Jack. He's suing me. Says he didn't get enough from the divorce and now wants to ruin me. I managed to get out between sobs. A couple of weeks later, the nightmare continued when I bumped into Jack and his new wife, Laura, at the school parking lot. I was there to pick up the boys, and there they were, leaning against their car, looking like they owned the place. Laura spotted me first and smirked. Look who it is. If it isn't the sad little ex-wife. Not taking very good care of yourself, are you, Erica? Don't worry, Tom will be out the door soon enough, just like Jack was. I felt my face flush with anger. Watch your mouth, Laura. You know nothing about my life. Jack chuckled, joining in. Oh, but we do, Erica. We know enough to see you're failing miserably. Maybe it's time someone else took over raising your kids. You're clearly not up to the task. That's enough, Jack, I shouted, my voice louder than I intended. The few parents milling about turned to look. You should be ashamed, talking like this in front of your own children. They walked away, leaving me there, fuming and humiliated. The drive back was quiet, my mind racing a mile a minute. How had my life come to this? Being threatened by my ex, insulted in front of my kids. But as we drove, my resolve hardened. Jack wanted a fight? He'd get one. Tom was already home when we arrived, and he could see the fire in my eyes as I walked through the door. "Babe, you okay? You look like you're ready to go to war," he said, a worried look crossing his face as he came over to help with the boys. "I am. I want to hire a private investigator," I said without preamble, dropping my keys on the counter with a clatter. "Jack's up to something, and I want to know what it is." The next day, Tom set up a meeting with the investigator, a grizzled guy named Mike, who had seen more shady dealings than a street corner in a noir film. We laid out everything, and Mike nodded, scribbling notes in a worn leather notebook. It didn't take long for Mike to get back to us. The news he brought wasn't just good, it was golden. Jack hadn't changed one bit, still the same cheater he always was, but this time he was playing around with a stripper. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I forwarded the evidence to Lara, adding just a note. "Thought you should know what your perfect husband is up to." The response was quicker than I expected. Lara called me, her voice choked with tears and something else, shame, maybe? "Erica, I'm so sorry," she stammered out between sobs. "I had no idea. I was so horrible to you, and now, Jack." "Lara, stop. It's not your fault he's a jerk," I found myself saying, the anger softening as I listened to her cry. "Look, I understand more than anyone what it's like to be lied to by that man." There was a heavy pause, and then Lara sniffled loudly. Can I help? I mean, I want to make this right. Not just for me, but for you too, Erica." I was taken aback. This was the last thing I expected. "Let's meet. We can talk about it." "Thank you, Erica. Really, thank you," she said, her voice cracking again. As I hung up the phone, a mix of emotions swirled through me. I had started this to protect myself and hit back at Jack, but now it felt like something more. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about setting things right. Somehow, against all odds, Lara and I were on the same side now. This battle had just taken a very unexpected turn. Sitting in the little cafe with the red awning, waiting for Lara, felt surreal. Just weeks ago, she was an enemy, laughing at me alongside Jack. Now, she could be an unexpected ally. The bell above the door jingled, snapping me out of my thoughts as Lara walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Her walk was determined as she slid into the booth across from me, clutching a bulky folder. "Erica, thank you for meeting me," she started, her voice shaky but sincere. I nodded, straight to the point. "What do you have for me, Lara?" Without a word, she pushed the folder across the table. "Everything you need to know about Jack's recent activities." I opened the folder, scanning the documents rapidly. My heart sank with each page. There were emails and texts between Jack and several of my top employees, offering them double their current pay to jump ship and join a new venture he was planning. "This is just the beginning," Lara said. "He's been spreading rumors about your restaurants. Claims of unsanitary conditions, poor service, even paid people to write bad reviews online." The world seemed to spin a little. "And the lawsuits?" "He's gearing up to claim you've hidden profits, that you cheated him out of his rightful share during the divorce," she added, her eyes darkening. I leaned back, absorbing the blow. This was worse than I thought. Jack was playing dirty, trying to take everything I'd worked so hard to build. "Does he know you're doing this?" I asked, eyeing her carefully. Lara shook her head vigorously. "No, and he can't know. Not yet. I can't believe I was so blind. Just beat him, Erica. Show him he can't push us around." I took the documents home and showed them to Tom, who read through them with a furrowed brow. "We've got him," Tom said confidently after a long silence. "With this evidence, we can not only defend against his claims, but go on the offensive. He won't know what hit him." Buoyed by Tom's confidence, I knew what I had to do next. The following day, I called a meeting with all my staff at the main restaurant. The air was tense as everyone gathered, whispering about the urgent summon. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'm sure you've heard rumors lately, bad reviews, talks of unsanitary conditions. It's all a targeted attack on us, by my ex-husband Jack." The room was silent for a moment before Marco, now my head chef, stood up. "We're with you, Erica. We know the truth. We see how hard you work, how much you care. Jack's got nothing on you." Nods and murmurs of agreement followed, the team's solidarity palpable. "Thank you," I said, feeling a surge of relief and determination. "And I want to take this a step further. Starting today, we're installing live cameras in the kitchens. Let our customers see the truth for themselves." The announcement was met with applause, the team rallied by the proactive approach. I didn't stop there. I took to social media, posting a video explaining the situation. "Come see for yourself," I invited our customers. "Take a tour, watch our chefs at work. We have nothing to hide." The response was overwhelming. Bookings for kitchen tours came flooding in, and the community support was incredible. Our reservations spiked, people eager to stand with us against the underhanded tactics, trying to undermine our integrity. A week later, Jack called me and offered to discuss our differences. The meeting was set in one of those upscale places that Jack always liked, the kind where they charge you $10 just to breathe their air. As soon as we were all seated, Jack wasted no time. "Erica, I'm willing to be generous here," he started, his voice oozing false charm. "I'm ready to forgive you for all the trouble you've caused, and all I'm asking in return is a couple of your restaurants and, let's say, a small compensation of $1 million. I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. Then, the absurdity of his demand hit me, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "You're joking, right? Please tell me this is a joke." "I'm dead serious, Erica. It's more than fair, considering the circumstances," Jack sneered, looking at Lara. "Tell them, honey. Tell them your dad's backing us up." Lara's expression was unreadable at first, then she turned to Jack, her voice calm but cold enough to chill the wine. "Actually, Jack, there's been a change of plans." Jack blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Lara stood up, her chair scraping back sharply. She reached into her purse, pulling out a stack of papers. "I'm talking about this, Jack." She threw the papers on the table, they scattered slightly, the word divorce visible on the top sheet. Jack's face went white as he picked up the papers, his hands trembling. "Lara, what, why?" "Because I know about your affairs, all of them. Your sweet stripper was the final straw." Lara's voice broke slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "And my father, he's indeed getting his lawyers involved, but not to help you. They'll be representing me in the divorce and suing you for everything you've done." She turned to me, her eyes softer. "Erica, I should have believed you from the start. I'm so sorry for everything." I reached out, squeezing her hand briefly. "It's okay, Lara. We both fell for his lies. But it's over now." Lara nodded, pulling her hand back and taking a deep breath. "It is." She looked back at Jack, who was now slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands. "Goodbye, Jack." With that, Lara walked out of the restaurant, her head held high. The silence that followed was heavy. Jack finally looked up, his eyes red. "Erica, please, I can change. Don't let her do this. Don't let her ruin me." Tom's laugh was harsh, echoing slightly in the suddenly too quiet restaurant. "You did that all on your own, Jack. Erica has nothing to do with it. And as for that lawsuit you were so eager about, expect one from us for defamation. And trust me, we have more than enough to bury you." We stood up, ready to leave this mess behind. Jack remained seated, a broken figure who'd finally run out of moves. The courtroom was hushed as Tom and I waited for the judge to deliver the final verdict. My hands were clammy, clasped tightly together in my lap, while Tom, ever the rock, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. The judge looked over the rim of his glasses, his voice steady and clear. In the matter of the defamation and damage to reputation brought by Ms. Erica against Mr. Jack, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Erica. It is ordered that Mr. Jack pay a sum of $500,000 in damages. A gasp went through the courtroom, mostly from Jack's side, but the sound was music to my ears. Tom leaned over, his whisper just for me. "We did it, babe. You stood your ground, and you won." I could hardly believe it. After everything Jack had put me through, justice was finally served. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, not of sorrow but of relief, of closure. But our legal victories didn't end there. Lara, true to her word, had gone after Jack with everything she had. Her father's lawyers were relentless, and Jack was ordered to pay a massive settlement for his infidelity and the emotional distress he caused. In the aftermath, Jack's restaurant empire began to falter. Saddled with debt and a tarnished reputation, he couldn't keep up. When his main restaurant came up for sale, Tom nudged me gently. "You should buy it, turn it into something good." And I did. I purchased his restaurant at a fraction of its worth. One afternoon, as I surveyed my new property, Lara walked in. Since the trial, we'd found solace in our shared struggles and had become unlikely friends. "Looks different when it's empty, doesn't it?" she remarked, her voice echoing slightly in the vacant space. "It does. But it won't be for long. I'm thinking of turning this place into a family-friendly venue, something the community can really enjoy," I shared, excited about the possibilities. We walked through the empty restaurant, planning and dreaming about what it could become. Lara, now free from Jack's shadow, was thinking about starting her own business, perhaps something in interior design. "You've got an eye for it," I encouraged her. "You helped me see the potential in this old place." As we stood there, talking about the future, I felt a profound sense of peace. The battles were over, the past finally put to rest. I had my family, my friends, and a future that looked brighter than it had in years. "You know, I never thought we'd end up here," Lara said, gesturing around us. "Me neither," I laughed. "But I'm glad we did. It's funny how life works out, isn't it?" As we left the building, the sun was setting, casting long shadows and bathing the street in golden light. I took a deep breath, feeling truly free for the first time in years. The road hadn't been easy, but it led me here, to this moment, this feeling of complete and utter freedom. I came into this world not with a cheer, but a burden. My mother, Elizabeth, wasn't ready for me, or maybe she just never wanted to be. It's hard to tell the difference when you're the unwanted one. From my first breath, I was more a problem than a person in her eyes. "You never stop crying, do you?" she would hiss during those long nights of my infancy. Her voice was often laced with irritation, lacking the gentle touch you'd expect from a mother. My father, Michael, was different. He was the one who stepped up, trading sleep for soothing walks with me in his arms, while my mother locked herself away in silence. "Let me take her, Liz," I remember him pleading one night, his voice as soft as the blankets he wrapped me in. "You need to rest." As I grew, the gap between my mother's affection and indifference widened, especially when Emily was born. Suddenly, there was light in my mother's eyes, but it wasn't for me. "Look at her, Michael. She's perfect," Mom cooed over Emily, something I never heard directed at me. The differences were stark. While Emily slept quietly in her arms, I was often left playing alone or trying to help around the house. "Why don't you be a good big sister and play quietly? Emily is sleeping." Mom would often chide when my footsteps or small voice crept a decibel too high. My role in the house grew as I got older. I wasn't just the elder sister, I was the helper, the cook, the cleaner, whatever kept me busy and out of the way. As time went on, I learned the art of invisibility at home. It was easier to blend into the background, to anticipate needs before they were spoken. By the time high school rolled around, I was more the family caretaker than their child. "Anna, make sure the laundry's done and dinner's ready by 6, Mom would command as she left with Emily for another shopping trip, their laughter a bitter sound as it faded down the hallway. "Yes, Mom," was always my reply, mechanical, rehearsed. At school, things were different. I was a good student, quiet but diligent. Teachers noticed me, praised me, something that never happened at home. They encouraged me, talked about potential and futures that seemed so distant from my reality. "Have you thought about college, Anna?" Mr. Henderson, my English teacher, once asked. His encouragement felt like a lifeline. "I'd like to, sir. I really would," I admitted, a flicker of hope stirring within. Those moments, rare and precious, were what fueled me. They made the long days and lonely nights bearable. They whispered of a life beyond the confines of my mother's cold indifference and the shadow of my sister's favored existence. A life where maybe, just maybe, I could be seen for who I was, not just for what I could do for others. By the time I graduated high school, I had my plan all mapped out. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple escape from a home that felt more like a prison. The day I turned 18, I packed my bags, mostly filled with second-hand clothes and a few cherished books. "You really going through with this?" Dad asked, his face lined with worry as he watched me stuff a duffel bag. "Your mom's gonna flip, you know. She expects you to stick around, help out with the house, with Emily." I zipped up the bag with more force than necessary. "I know. But I can't stay here, Dad. I gotta try and make something of myself." I moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town, close enough to my new job at a local diner. The work was hard and the hours were long, but every paycheck was a step closer to my goal. The diner was a noisy, bustling place, filled with the clatter of dishes and the constant chatter of customers. I learned to keep my head down and my hands busy. Nights were spent in a cramped study corner of my apartment, textbooks spread out as I worked through community college applications. I was determined to be more than a waitress, more than what my mother said I'd be. "Why you both errand with all that school stuff?" my neighbor, Jo, once asked when she caught me buried in paperwork. "Ain't like it's gonna change much." "It might not," I admitted, "but it's worth a shot. I want to be a teacher, Jo. I want to do something meaningful." Jo snorted, dragging on her cigarette. "Well, good luck with that, kid. This world ain't kind to dreamers." Saving money became a game of numbers. Every tip went into a jar, every spare dollar tucked away for future tuition. I cut corners everywhere, lived on ramen and toast, and kept my eyes on the prize. After a year of relentless work and study, I had enough to enroll in college. I chose the local community college, affordable and within commuting distance. The day I received my acceptance letter, I felt a surge of pride like never before. Walking into my first class, I felt out of place with my worn-out jeans and second-hand textbooks, but I was there, in a seat, ready to learn. "You here for the early childhood education program?" a girl next to me asked, her pen tapping nervously on her notebook. "I'm Sarah. We should study together, maybe?" "Sure, Sarah. I'm Anna. I'd like that." College was a whole new world, one where I wasn't just the forgotten daughter or the hard-working waitress. I was a student, a peer, and soon, I found myself part of a community. Evenings were still spent at the diner, but now my days were filled with lectures, group projects, and a growing belief that I could really make this happen. I could become someone who made a difference. The path wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear that maybe Jo was right, that maybe the world wasn't kind to dreamers. But every time I helped a classmate understand a tough concept, or received praise from a professor, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. By the time my second year of college rolled around, I was deep into my studies and working the evening shift at the diner. One evening, as I balanced a tray full of burgers and shakes, my phone buzzed in my apron. It was an email from the college financial office. My heart skipped. This was it, the scholarship decision. I waited until my break, hands shaking as I logged in to read the email. "Congratulations," it began. "We are pleased to inform you." I didn't need to read the rest, I had done it. A full ride for the next year. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding and slid down against the wall, relief washing over me. The following weeks flew by in a blur of exams and late-night shifts. But with my financial worries eased, I was able to focus more on what I really loved, learning how to teach. As the semester ended, I started applying for teaching positions, each application sent with a mix of hope and nerves. One afternoon, while I was setting up for a job fair, my old classmate, Sarah, bumped into me. "Listen, are you still looking for a job? My aunt's school is looking for a new primary teacher. You should totally apply." I followed up on Sarah's tip and landed an interview. The night before, I practiced answers to possible questions in front of my mirror, determined to come off as confident and competent. The principal, Mr. Davis, was a stern-looking man who softened a bit as we talked. "Why do you want to work with children?" he asked, peering at me over his glasses. "Because I believe every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be." I walked out of there feeling like I had just won my second scholarship. A week later, I got the call. I was in. I was going to be a teacher. After years of working tirelessly as a teacher and constantly hitting the books at night to stay ahead, I decided it was high time to invest in a proper laptop. Walking into the tech store, I was more than a little out of my element. Rows of shiny, high-tech gadgets lined the walls, each one promising the world. I must have looked lost because a guy with a friendly smile and a name tag that read Tom approached me. "Need some help finding something?" he asked, his tone friendly. "Yeah, I'm looking for a laptop that can handle a lot of multitasking and won't give up on me in a year," I replied, hoping I sounded like I knew what I was talking about. Tom nodded, showing me a few models and explaining the specs in a way that didn't go right over my head. "This one here would be perfect for what you need, and it's within budget." As he rang up the sale, he gave a casual, "You seem really into your work. If you ever need tech advice, or any advice, really, here's my number." We started texting, casual at first, then daily. Dates followed, easy nights out where the laughter flowed as freely as the conversation. But whenever things edged towards serious, Tom was quick with the brakes. "We're still young, Anna. There's no rush," he'd say, every time I hinted at something deeper. I didn't push it. I was busy enough, and having someone even just to laugh with felt like a win. But then, one lazy Saturday morning, as I was enjoying my coffee and the rare chance to sleep in, my phone rang. It was Mom, which was unusual enough to spike my heartbeat. "Anna, it's your dad. He's really sick. You should come." The weight in her voice pulled me upright. "I'm on my way." Tom, sprawled on the couch, sat up. "Everything okay?" "It's my dad. I have to go see him. He's sick." "I'll come with you," he offered, and something in his tone made it clear he wasn't asking. We drove in silence, the tension thick. As we pulled up to the family house, his whistle cut through the quiet. "Damn, Anna, you didn't say you grew up in a mansion." "It's not as glamorous as it looks," I murmured, my stomach knotting up as we walked to the door. Inside, Mom and Emily were the picture of superficial concern. I introduced Tom, their smiles a little too polished. "Nice to finally meet the man making our Anna so happy," Mom cooed, her eyes appraising. "We were just talking about the future," Emily chimed in, eyeing Tom like a new accessory she might like to try. I barely listened, my focus on getting to Dad. He was propped up in bed, looking so frail it knocked the breath from me. "Anna, my girl," he rasped as I approached. "I'm sorry for everything." Tears stung my eyes, but I managed a smile. "It's okay, Dad. I'm here now." "I should have been stronger. Should have stood up for you more," he continued, each word labored. We talked a little more until he drifted off, tired from the effort. I kissed his forehead and joined the others at dinner, Tom in tow. The conversation at the table turned quickly to money, inheritances, things that seemed so trivial with Dad's room just upstairs. "Your father's made some smart investments," Mom was saying, her voice light, almost excited. It should keep us comfortable. Yeah, I've been looking at trips to Europe, Emily added, like she was picking out items from a catalog. Tom listened, nodding along, but I felt sick. Shouldn't we focus on Dad's health first? I interjected, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Oh, Anna, always so dramatic, Emily sighed. We have to be practical about the future. I wanted to argue, to scream that they were talking about Dad like he was already gone. But I bit my tongue, the words tasting like bile. We drove back to my place, the city lights blurring past as I let the distance from that house, from those people, slowly help me breathe easier. Coming back from that unsettling dinner at my parents' place, Tom seemed more contemplative than usual. We'd barely closed the door to my apartment when he turned to me, his expression serious. Anna, I've been thinking a lot lately, he began, running a hand through his hair. Marry me, Anna. The proposal was as unexpected as a thunderclap in clear skies. What? Tom, where is this coming from? I know it's sudden, he admitted, stepping closer. But today, seeing everything. I just know I want to be there for you, for good. We don't need anything big, just us, together. His words, sincere and raw, cut through the confusion. I loved him, that much was clear. And maybe, just maybe, he was the solid thing I could hold on to. Okay, yes, I said, the decision feeling right despite the chaos of my thoughts. We didn't wait. The very next week, we stood together at City Hall, exchanging simple vows in a quiet room. No frills, no grand speeches, just a promise to each other. But even the warmth of new marriage couldn't shield me from the concern for my father. His health was deteriorating, each visit painting a starker picture than the last. One afternoon, as I sat beside his bed, holding his hand while he dozed, he stirred and looked at me with a clarity that had become rare. Anna, he murmured, squeezing my hand. When I'm gone, there'll be something for you. A surprise. I brushed his hair back from his forehead, smiling to ease his worries. Dad, don't talk like that. You need to focus on getting better. But he shook his head gently. Just know that I did what I could. His words hung between us, heavy and somber. I chose not to press him, thinking it was the illness speaking, his mind fogged by medication and pain. Leaving his room that day felt harder than ever. At home, Tom tried to comfort me, but the image of my father's frail form haunted me. Meanwhile, Mom and Emily's conversations about the future grew more frequent and filled with cold calculations. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen while I was supposed to be out. The medical bills are piling up, and with your father like this, well, it's not sustainable, Mom was saying, her voice laced with impatience. I've already signed up for plastic surgery to find a new boyfriend. Emily responded, her tone just as calculating. We need to think about what comes next. I want that new car that you and I saw in the salon. Frustrated and heartbroken, I left them to their scheming. Back at my place, Tom held me close as I cried, my tears for my father, for the family I wished I had. The day we buried my father was cold and gray, the sky mourning with us as friends and relatives came to pay their respects. That evening, the family gathered at my parents' house. The air was thick with tension, everyone too aware of the elephant in the room, the inheritance. I was emotionally drained and wanted nothing more than to honor my father's memory in peace, but that wasn't to be. Tom was the first to break the silence about the will. So, what's going to happen now with the inheritance? We need to know what we're dealing with here, he said, his tone a bit too casual for the occasion. I shot him a look, my heart sinking. Tom, can we not do this right now? Today isn't about money. But he pressed on, oblivious or indifferent to my discomfort. I'm just saying, it's important. I mean, shouldn't the house go to Anna? It's only fair. My mother, who had been quietly listening, laughed dryly. Fair? This house has always belonged to Emily and me. You two were just passing through. Tom's face hardened, and he turned to my sister. Emily, you know this isn't right. Anna deserves her share. Emily, looking more interested than she had all evening, fluttered her eyelashes at Tom. "Oh, Tom, you always think of others." But Mom's right, as usual. The conversation spiraled, voices raised in a bitter symphony. I felt sick listening to them, the words melding into a cacophony of greed. How could a day of mourning turn so quickly into a scramble for wealth? As they argued, Tom's attitude shifted, his earlier support for me fading as he began to compliment Emily on her sensible outlook. Watching him sidle up to my sister, something in me snapped. I couldn't stomach another minute of it. I fled to my father's room, the one place that still held traces of his presence, and collapsed into a restless sleep. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of coffee and found Tom in the kitchen. His expression was grave, a stark contrast to the light banter of just days before. "Anna, we need to talk," he began, avoiding my gaze. "I'm in love with Emily. I think she and I have a future together." The room spun a little, his declaration landing like a physical blow. "You're what? Tom, are you serious?" Before he could answer, I called Emily and Mom to join us. Emily came down, looking smug, while Mom watched with a curious eye. "I just wanted you to hear it from me first," Emily said, her tone infuriatingly calm. "I'm a decent person, Anna. I didn't want to go behind your back." Mom nodded, her approval evident. "It's very noble of you, Emily, to be so upfront about this." Their words, their betrayal, it was too much. I felt a cold, hard calm settle over me. "You all deserve each other," I said quietly. Tom extended the divorce papers toward me, a pen poised. Without hesitation, I signed, each stroke of my name severing the ties that bound us. "You'll get your things through a courier. Don't come back." With that, I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and didn't look back. I was free now, and with that freedom, a new path lay open. A path I would walk alone, but at least it was mine, honest and unencumbered. 2 weeks later, we all got back together in the notary's sterile office, about to hear the reading of my father's will. The air was tense, thick with unspoken accusations and bitter expectations. Mom and Emily were chatting in hushed, anxious tones, while Tom looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat next to Emily. The notary, Mr. Clarkson, a severe-looking man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, cleared his throat and began reading the will. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, bracing for whatever came next. "To my daughter Anna," Mr. Clarkson read, his voice neutral, "I leave the sum of $400,000. The room went silent for a heartbeat before chaos erupted. Mom's face turned a shade of red I knew too well as her financial desperation spilled out. "I have debts, Anna. Your father knew. He promised he'd take care of us," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. Emily joined in, her voice sharp and accusing. "And what about me? I'm getting married to Tom. We need that money for a proper wedding." "You don't need all that money, Anna." I stared at them, the sheer audacity rendering me momentarily speechless. Tom, meanwhile, tried to play the affection card, stepping toward me with open arms. "I've missed you, Anna. I've made a mistake. I only ever loved you." Before he could reach me, Emily yanked him back by the shirt, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Tom, what are you doing?" He tried to wriggle free from her grasp, but Emily's grip was tight, her nails practically digging into his skin. "Enough," Mr. Clarkson's voice boomed through the room, louder than I'd ever heard. "If you cannot behave in a civilized manner, I will have to ask you to leave. And if necessary, I will call the police." The threat of authority seemed to pierce through the chaos, bringing a sudden, sullen silence to the room. Mom and Emily, with crocodile tears streaming down their faces, turned to me once more. "Anna, please," my mother begged, her voice softening to a manipulative whisper. "Think of your family." Emily, still clinging to Tom, echoed her plea. "We're your family, Anna. Don't we mean anything to you?" Looking at them, at their false tears and desperate faces, something inside me hardened. These were not the actions of a family, they were the actions of vultures dressed in familiar skins. "No," I said firmly, my voice steady, despite the shaking of my hands. This money is what Dad wanted me to have. He knew I would use it wisely, not squander it on debts or lavish weddings. Tom, Emily, and Mom stared back, a mixture of shock and indignation written across their faces. "You'll regret this, Anna. You won't be happy with this money," Mom hissed as I turned to leave. "Maybe," I replied, pausing at the door. "But I'd rather find that out on my own, without any of you." As I stepped into the sunlight, the cool air felt like the first breath of a new life, one where I was no longer bound by the toxic ties of those who shared my blood but not my values. I used the money to open a small private kindergarten. It was something I'd dreamed of, a place where children could feel loved and valued, the way I wished I had felt growing up. The process wasn't easy. There were permits to obtain, a property to renovate, curriculums to design, and staff to hire. But every step felt right. I named it Bright Beginnings, a nod to the new start it represented for me and the children we would serve. Business was good, better than I had hoped. Parents loved our approach, and word of mouth spread. Soon, we were at full capacity, and I began planning an expansion. One day, while reviewing blueprints with my assistant, Jenny, my phone buzzed with an update from a name I hadn't seen in a while, Rachel, a mutual acquaintance of my family. "Hey Anna, thought you should know, your mom and Emily sold the house. They had to move out of town, ended up in a small place. Not much left after settling their debts," she texted. I stared at the screen for a long moment. "Thanks for the update, Rachel," I typed back, a mix of emotions swirling through me. As the days turned into weeks, Bright Beginnings grew not just in size, but in reputation. It was during this busy time that Tom reappeared, as unexpectedly as he had exited my life. I was returning from a meeting when I found him standing outside my apartment, a huge bouquet in his hands and that same charming smile plastered on his face. "Anna, hey. I've been thinking about you," he said as I approached, trying to hand me the flowers. I stopped short, my keys in my hand, an incredulous laugh escaping me. "Really, Tom? After everything, you think flowers will fix it? Come on, Anna. I made a mistake. Can we talk?" His voice was coaxing, his smile faltering just a bit. I looked at him, really looked at him, and all I saw was the same selfishness, the same opportunism. "No, Tom. We can't. There's nothing for you here." He lingered for a moment, the smile finally slipping off his face as he realized I was serious. Then, with nowhere left to push, he turned and left, the discarded flowers lying wilted by my doorstep. The next few months flew by. Bright Beginnings became not just a daycare, but a cornerstone of the community. We hosted family events, workshops for parents, and continued to expand our services. As I watched the children play in the newly added outdoor play area, their laughter ringing clear and true, I felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. I had built something lasting, something meaningful. Today was my 35th birthday. I woke up feeling the usual aches and pains that came with my chronic illness, a constant companion since childhood. As the CEO of a thriving tech startup, I usually masked my pain with work and caffeine, but not today. Today felt different, heavier somehow. I decided a trip to the private clinic was necessary, a place I'd come to view almost as a second home. I knew most of the staff by name, but it was Tom, the young nurse, who always caught my attention. Tom was charming, with a quick smile that made many of the patients blush, myself included. He was also persistent. Today, when I walked through the clinic's doors, he was the first to greet me. "Happy birthday, Elena, looking sharp as always," he grinned, his eyes lighting up as he approached me. "You know, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, you know." I sighed, settling onto the clinic bed. "Appreciate it, Tom, but you know my situation. It's complicated." As Tom prepared the drip, he didn't miss a beat. "I don't care about your illness, Elena. I like you. Whenever you're ready to talk about us, I'm here." As Tom busied himself with the charts, I tried to focus on the positives. I was successful, I was independent, but as much as I hated to admit it, I was lonely too. The day dragged on with the usual rounds of tests and doctor's visits. By late afternoon, I was ready to head back home, but Tom had other ideas. "Hey, birthday girl, you can't just go home and mope. Let's grab dinner, my treat. Let's celebrate you," he insisted. I hesitated. It was tempting to spend more time with him outside the sterile clinic walls. "Okay, but just as friends." "Just as friends," he agreed, but the twinkle in his eye said more. Dinner with Tom was easy and filled with laughter. He had a way of making me forget about the clinical coldness of my routine. As we talked, it wasn't just about my health or the clinic, it was about movies, travel, and food. It was normal, and for a moment, I let myself enjoy it. "Elena, you're incredible, you know that?" Tom said as he walked me to my car afterward. "Listen, I meant what I said earlier. I want to be there for you, in whatever way you let me." I looked up at him, the streetlights casting shadows across his earnest face. "Tom, it's not that simple. My life, my health, it's a lot for anyone to handle." "I'm not just anyone, Elena. I'm the guy who's asking you to take a chance on me," he replied, his voice steady and sure. I felt a rush of emotions. Here was this wonderful man, willing to accept me with all my complications. "Let's take it slow, okay?" As I drove home, his invitation replayed in my mind. Maybe, just maybe, I could let myself have this slice of happiness. After all, wasn't life too short to spend alone? 6 months flew by faster than I could have imagined. Tom and I were seeing each other regularly, and every moment spent together seemed to ease the constant discomfort of my illness. He made everything feel simpler, lighter. Yet, beneath the surface, I harbored reservations about our future given my health, but Tom never seemed to waver. One crisp Saturday evening, as the autumn leaves painted the city in hues of orange and red, Tom suggested a walk through the park after dinner. "Elena, you know I'm not much for fancy speeches, right?" Tom started, his voice a bit shaky, which was unlike him. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how happy you make me. I want this to be a forever thing." I felt my heart skip a beat. "Tom, are you sure? You know my situation. It's not going to get any easier." "Yeah, I know. And I don't care. I want all of it, the good days, the bad days, and everything in between." He then took a small box out of his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet beautiful ring. "Elena, will you marry me?" The proposal caught me off guard. I knew I loved him, but commitment at this level was something I hadn't allowed myself to consider seriously because of my health complications. Seeing him there, so sure of us, made all my defenses start to crumble. "Yes, Tom. Yes, I'll marry you." We embraced, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to disappear. It was just us, and it felt right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. We decided on a small ceremony, nothing fancy, just us and a few close friends, including his sister and her husband. But before any of that, I needed to address the practicalities of our future together. Sitting down with Tom one evening, I brought out the prenuptial agreement I had drawn up. "I want to talk about something a bit, well, practical. It's important, given my business and my health." Tom nodded. "Anything, Elena." I handed him the papers. "It's a prenup." He took the documents, scanning them briefly before looking up at me with a smile. "If that makes you feel secure, I'm okay with it. I'm not here for the money, Elena. I'm here for you." "And you're sure? You're really sure about this?" I pressed, needing to hear it just one more time. "Absolutely," he assured me, signing the document without a second thought. "Now, can we go back to planning our tiny wedding?" "Yeah, we can," I replied, feeling a mixture of relief and love. Tom's easy acceptance of the prenup reassured me of his intentions and commitment. Our wedding day was simple and perfect. The city hall ceremony was quick, and the only people present were those we loved most. Standing there, exchanging vows with Tom, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, life was giving me a chance to have something beautiful, despite everything. Life after our quiet little wedding was, for a while, pretty close to what I'd imagined as perfect. Tom and I settled into our new life together, and he took over running the household. It was a nice change. I'd come home to incredible smells wafting from the kitchen, and the place looked spotless. The first few months felt like we were in some sort of honeymoon phase that just kept going. But about a year in, things started to change subtly. I noticed that Tom seemed a bit off. His enthusiasm for things around the house began to wane, and he seemed more withdrawn. At first, I chalked it up to the adjustment of living together or the end of the honeymoon phase, but the shift was palpable. One day, I came home early to surprise him with news about a potential new client for my business. I walked in, expecting to find him bustling around in the kitchen or maybe sorting out the laundry. Instead, the house was quiet, too quiet. Puzzled, I walked towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard it, voice. I paused by the door, listening. A woman's voice, cheerful and unfamiliar, chatting away as if she owned the place. Pushing the door open, I saw a middle-aged woman, humming as she chopped vegetables. She looked up, startled. "Oh, you must be Elena. I'm June. Tom didn't say you'd be home this early." "June? And who exactly are you?" I managed to keep my voice steady, despite the shock. "I'm the housekeeper. Tom hired me about a year ago. I come in a few times a week to clean up and cook. Makes things easier, you know?" She smiled, clearly unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. A housekeeper? For a year? And I had no clue? I felt a mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me, but I kept it together. "Right, I see. Thanks, June. Would you mind giving us a moment?" "Of course." She wiped her hands and left the room. When Tom came home, he found me sitting in the living room, still processing everything. His face fell the moment he saw my expression. "Who's June, Tom?" I asked bluntly. Tom hesitated, then sighed. "She's the housekeeper." "Look, I meant to tell you, but I thought you'd be upset about me not doing the stuff around the house myself." "Upset? Tom, you think I'd be upset about who cleans or cooks?" "I'm upset because you lied, because you thought this was something you had to hide." My voice rose with every word. I know, and I'm sorry. It started small, and then I just didn't know how to bring it up without making it a big deal. It seemed easier to just keep it going." He tried to explain, looking genuinely remorseful. "Easier for who, Tom? Because this doesn't feel easy for me." I shot back. We talked it out that night. He apologized, and I tried to understand his perspective. But something had shifted between us, a small crack that made me wonder what else he might not be telling me. Things smoothed over a bit after that, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Tom continued to be great at making dinner and keeping the house in order, but now I knew he wasn't the one actually doing all the work. It felt like our roles were clear. I worked, and he managed the home, except he didn't really manage it, he outsourced it. And yet something about Tom's behavior was off, and it wasn't just the hidden housekeeper issue. His late-night whispers on the phone, his sudden need for privacy, and his constant excuses for needing more money, it all added up to something sinister. So, I did what any self-respecting woman with my resources would do. I hired a private detective. It wasn't long before the detective came back with news, and it wasn't the kind I'd hoped for. Tom was spending most of his days at a casino, and the sums of money he was losing were staggering. I felt a mix of relief and despair, relief that there wasn't another woman, but despair at the size of his deception. That evening, when Tom came home, I was waiting for him in the living room, the detective's report in hand. He tried to kiss me hello, but I stepped back, holding up the papers. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice cold and more composed than I felt. Tom sank down onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this out of hand. It started small, just a way to blow off some steam. But it got bigger, and I didn't know how to stop." "And you thought the best way to deal with it was to lie to me? To steal from me?" My voice was rising now, my temper flaring. "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. I need help. I want to quit, I swear. I need your help to get out of this mess." His voice was desperate, pleading. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I'll help you, Tom, but this is the last time. You need to get treatment for your addiction, and you're going to sign a receipt acknowledging the debt I'm paying off. It's $50,000, Tom. $50,000. Tom nodded miserably. Yes, anything you say. I'll do it. I'll get help. We arranged for him to start treatment the following week. But just when I thought we might be finding our way back to some sort of normalcy, Tom dropped another bombshell. Out of the blue, he said, Elena, I've been thinking, maybe we should have a baby. It might bring us closer. I stared at him, incredulous. A baby? Tom, you know I can't. It's not just risky, it could be fatal for me. He quickly tried to backpedal. I know. I just thought, never mind. But the idea didn't go away. It kept coming up, more and more. Even his sister, an obstetrician, called me about it. You should reconsider, Elena. Having a baby is the most natural thing. Don't be selfish. Selfish? You're a doctor. You know my condition. How can you even suggest such a thing? I was furious. She scoffed and hung up on me. The conversation left me shaken. How could they be so callous, so cruel? Months of tension and unresolved arguments had frayed my nerves, but nothing could have prepared me for the scene I walked into that fateful day. I returned home earlier than usual, my steps quickening with the anticipation of a quiet evening. Instead, I opened the door to chaos, boxes piled up, and Tom's sister, Lisa, and her husband, Mark, arranging their belongings around my living room. What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my voice cutting through the noise. Lisa turned to face me, an unnerving calmness to her demeanor. Oh, we're moving in, Elena. This is Tom's place, and you should really start packing your things. My eyes flicked to Tom, searching for some sign of confusion or disagreement on his face, but there was none. Instead, he met my gaze with a look that chilled me to the bone. Elena, I can't do this anymore. You've been manipulating and controlling me for years. It's over, Tom declared, his voice cold and distant. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Manipulating you? Tom, what are you talking about? You heard him, Mark chimed in, his voice just as harsh. He's done being your slave. Tom stepped forward, a stack of papers in hand. Here are the divorce papers. I'm also filing for compensation for years of emotional abuse and alimony. I need to look after my well-being now. The room spun as I took the papers from his hand. This was a nightmare. I glanced through the documents, each word a betrayal. But rising panic gave way to a steely calm. I let out a laugh, short and devoid of humor. Well, you're in for a surprise. But go on, think what you want. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Without another word, I went to our bedroom, packed a suitcase with essentials, and prepared to leave. There was no point in arguing. The man I had married, the man I thought I knew, was gone. I drove away from the apartment and headed toward the elite cottage village where I had a house waiting, a home that was truly mine, bought long before Tom entered my life. As I passed the familiar gates and nodded to the guards, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The house was exactly as I left it, spacious, quiet, and tailored to my needs. It had always been my sanctuary, a place I had prepared for my future, knowing my health might take a turn for the worse. As night fell, I made a few phone calls, informing my closest friends of the situation and reassuring them I was okay. My lawyer was up next, ready to discuss our strategy. Tom and his outrageous claims would not go unchallenged. A few days after settling into my sanctuary, I was startled by a frantic call from Tom. His voice, laced with panic and fury, blared through the phone. Elena, you've set me up. This is some kind of sick game to you, isn't it? Calmly, with a small smile, I replied, Tom, if you think there's been a misunderstanding, why don't you come over and we'll talk about it? I'll send you the address. Soon after, the village gates swung open, and Tom, alongside Lisa and her husband Mark, drove through. I watched from the window as their car pulled up, their faces pressed against the car windows, eyes wide as they took in the view of my expansive home. They approached my front door, still gaping at the luxurious setting, their previous bravado seeming to shrink a bit. As I opened the door, I couldn't help but cough to clear the silence, then offered a wry smile. "Well, what brings you to my humble abode?" Tom, regaining some of his earlier fire, blurted out. "Your lawyer called me. He said I have to pay next month's rent for the apartment, $6,000. You never told me it wasn't your apartment. You never asked about it, and if you want to live in this apartment, pay the rent," I explained with deliberate patience. Lisa, ever the opportunist, chimed in, elbowing Tom. "And what about this place?" "It's gorgeous." Tom nodded vigorously. "Yeah, why don't you just give us this house instead of that apartment? Otherwise, we'll sue you for everything you've got." Their audacity was almost comical. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "You want to sue me for this house?" "Tom, dear, I bought this house long before you were in the picture. You have no claim over it whatsoever." Their faces turned red with frustration, and the shouting escalated. "You can't just kick us out. We have rights," Tom yelled. "That's where you're wrong," I replied, my voice firm as I picked up the phone. "Security, could you please escort these people out? They seem to be lost." Within minutes, the village security arrived, and the trio was promptly shown out. As they were escorted away, their indignant protests faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet that settled over the house like a comforting blanket. After they left, I sat back down, the laughter gone, replaced by a weary sigh. It was clear that Tom and his sister were grasping at straws, trying to intimidate me into giving up what was rightfully mine. I called my lawyer again, going over the details of the day's confrontation. "We need to be prepared for whatever they might try next," I told him, my tone resolute. "Don't worry, Elena. We'll handle this. They have no legal standing," he reassured me. The day of the court hearing arrived with a tension thick enough to slice through. I walked into the courtroom, my lawyer at my side, ready to face whatever Tom and his family had concocted. The allegations were ludicrous. Tom claimed that I had exploited him, turning him into what he dramatically referred to as my slave. He recounted stories of endless chores and a thankless life under my supposed tyranny, all while his sister Lisa and her husband Mark nodded vigorously, echoing his every word. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Luckily, it was soon our turn to present the reality of the situation. My lawyer stood, adjusting his suit jacket with a calm assurance. "Your Honor, we have evidence that contradicts every single one of Mr. Thomas's claims," he stated confidently, then turned to call our first witness. The au pair Tom had hired, June, came forward. I worked in their home, doing all the household chores and cooking. Mr. Thomas Elliot hardly lifted a finger. She testified, her statement backed by employment records and salary slips proving Tom hardly contributed to the household work as he claimed. After June's testimony, my lawyer presented the prenuptial agreement. As per this legally binding document, signed by both parties, he continued, pointing to the signatures at the bottom of the page. It clearly states that in the event of a divorce, Mr. Elliot is entitled to nothing. No alimony, no compensation. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the document sank in. Tom's face drained of color when my lawyer added, "Mr. Elliot, did you read this document before you signed it?" Tom stuttered. "Well, I saw the part about if something happened to Elena, but you didn't read it all. Is that correct?" my lawyer pressed. "Yes, but I didn't think." "You didn't think to read what you were signing," my lawyer cut him off, turning back to the judge. "Your Honor, we also wish to present proof of Mr. Elliot gambling debts, which Mrs. Elliot generously cleared, and for which we have a signed acknowledgement from Mr. Elliot himself." I watched as Tom slumped in his seat, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was clear and firm. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimonies, it is this court's decision to grant the divorce requested by Mrs. Elena Elliot. Furthermore, all claims for compensation and alimony by Mr. Thomas Elliot are denied." As we walked out of the courtroom, a sense of profound relief washed over me. But that relief was quickly overshadowed by the spectacle outside the courtroom. Lisa was furiously berating Tom, her words sharp and unforgiving. "You fool. All you had to do was get her pregnant and died, then we could have had everything. You couldn't even do that right." I stopped for a moment to take in the scene, the reality of their treachery settling in deeper. They hadn't just wanted money, they had hoped for my demise. Months had passed since the courtroom drama had unfolded, and I had slowly begun to reclaim my peace, focusing on my health and my business. One crisp morning, as I sipped my coffee and reviewed some business reports, the serenity was abruptly disrupted by an unexpected visitor. I glanced at the security monitor and saw Tom, looking disheveled and desperate, at the gates of my village. I instructed the guards to let him in, curious yet cautious about his sudden appearance. As he approached the front door, I could see the strain in his face, the weight of his recent hardships etched into his features. He fell to his knees as soon as I opened the door, an act so dramatic it almost seemed rehearsed. "Elena, please, I'm begging you, take me back. I'll do anything. I'll cook, clean, anything you want. Just let me stay here," he pleaded, his voice breaking. I stared down at him, my expression calm yet firm. "Tom, after everything, why would you think I'd ever consider such a thing? It wasn't all my idea, Elena. It was Lisa's plan to push for the baby, to end things that way. I never wanted any of it to happen. I swear, I was just caught up in it," he blurted out, desperation seeping through his every word. I took a deep breath, keeping my composure. "Tom, what you're failing to understand is that it's not just about what happened, or who planned what. It's about trust. And you broke that beyond repair. You didn't just follow Lisa's plans, you stood by her knowing full well how dangerous her schemes were for me." He scrambled to his feet, reaching out as if he could physically pull back the relationship we once had. "Elena, I'm lost without you. I've taken out a loan to pay back the $50,000, and I've started working again. I'm trying to fix my mistakes." "Fixing your mistakes doesn't mean you get to rewind and erase the consequences," I replied sharply. "What you need to understand, Tom, is that you chose this path. Now you must walk it alone." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered the cold, calculating discussions about my health and potential demise. "I want you to leave. Now," I said, my voice unwavering. "And Tom, don't come back. You are not welcome here, not now, not ever." When he hesitated, still trying to muster another plea, I turned and signaled to the security personnel who had discreetly remained close by. They stepped forward, escorting him away as he called out my name, his cries fading into the distance. After he was gone, I stood at the doorway for a few moments, letting the silence wash over me again. This house, this life, I had built it, and I would not let anyone disrupt it again. I returned to my morning routine, the disturbance now settling into a resolved chapter of my life. Looking ahead, my thoughts turned to future plans, the dreams of travel and meeting new people. The world was wide, and my heart, once burdened by betrayal, now felt lighter with possibilities. Life before Michael was pretty straight-laced: wake up, trade a bit on the stock exchange, head to my job in online advertising, then rinse and repeat. Simple, mundane, but it was mine. I always figured that someday I'd add a family to the mix, husband, kids, the whole shebang. I met Michael at a seminar for amateur traders. He was a speaker, all confidence and broad smiles, talking about big moves in the real estate market. After his talk, we ended up at the same coffee station. "Strong coffee, strong investments, right?" he joked, pouring himself a cup. "Something like that. But I usually go for less volatile stocks myself," I replied, trying to sound more savvy than I felt. "Oh, playing it safe, huh? I like taking a bit more risk," he said with a wink. That wink should have been my first warning, but who was I to know? We started seeing each other, and things moved fast, swept up in romance and the excitement of it all. He was 10 years older, had his life figured out, or so it seemed. Loads of charm, money, and promises that came easy to him. About a year into our whirlwind romance, Michael popped the question on a chilly evening, right there on the balcony of his fancy high-rise apartment. "Marry me, Sarah. I want all my tomorrows to start with you," he said, holding out a ring that was frankly too flashy for my taste. But who was I to complain? It felt like a dream. 2 days before the wedding, Michael dropped another surprise, just as we were finalizing our dinner menu. "We need to talk about something, Sarah. It's important," he said, serious all of a sudden. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, figuring it was just some last-minute guest list drama. "I think we should sign a prenuptial agreement," he said, avoiding my eyes. "A prenup? Now? 2 days before the wedding?" I was shocked, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" "It's just practical, Sarah. It's not about us, it's about protecting what we've got. You know, just in case. I've got a lot tied up in real estate, and you're doing well with your trading. It's just standard stuff. My lawyer drafted something up. He says it's pretty standard, protects both of us." His casual dismissal stung. "Standard for who, Michael? Your lawyer? I don't even have one." "Look, he's a good guy. He'll take care of everything, even talk you through it. On me, of course. I'll pay for it," he added quickly, as if that would smooth everything over. I remember standing there in his kitchen, feeling like a complete outsider in what was supposed to be my future home, with my future husband who suddenly seemed like a stranger. But I was too deep in, too embarrassed to call anything off, and honestly, too scared to start over. So, I caved. "Fine. Let's just get this over with," I muttered, feeling a mix of defeat and anger boiling inside. "Great, I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow. You'll see, it's all standard stuff," Michael assured me, but his reassurances felt hollow. The next day, his lawyer, a slick guy named Ron, walked me through the document. "It's all very straightforward," Ron assured me, flipping through pages that might as well have been written in another language. "You keep what's yours, he keeps his. Clean and simple." Clean and simple, right. If only I knew then just how complicated things would get. After the whirlwind of the wedding, which honestly was more of a blur of faces and congratulations than anything, Michael and I settled into what you could call married life. But even that felt more like living with a charming roommate than a husband, what with all the terms we'd signed off on. Michael's life was a series of business calls and trips. "Gotta keep the wheels turning, Sarah," he'd say, kissing my forehead before jetting off to some city or another. I mostly stayed back, working from home, trading stocks like it was my lifeline. It wasn't the family life I'd pictured, but then again, what was? His business was booming, and my trading wasn't doing too bad either. But whenever I brought up maybe putting my earnings into buying a place for me, Michael had his own ideas. "Hold off on that, babe. I'm eyeing a new property, could use a bit more liquidity," he'd say, always planning the next big purchase. One evening, he came home more stressed than usual. "Market's brutal, babe. Got a loan coming up due that I totally spaced on," he admitted over a too-late dinner. "Can't you roll it over or something?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. "That's the kicker. It's tied up with my other assets. Bit of a cash flow snag," he explained, sounding tired. Suddenly he remembered my savings, the ones I'd been hoping to put towards a house, maybe start that dream family. "You could help," he said slowly. "I mean, it'll ease the snag." Michael looked at me then pleadingly, really looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. "Okay, I'll do it. What's mine is yours," I said, echoing the words he hadn't exactly said but had implied in so many ways. Right, of course, babe. It's just until this thing smooths over. I'll pay you back," he promised, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and love. Love because I believed in us, in him. Apprehension because, deep down, I knew money and love were a messy mix. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months. Michael's promises of repayment became as frequent as his business trips, mentioned but never fulfilled. Our conversations about it were circular, always ending with him kissing my forehead and promising, "Soon, babe, soon." And me? I believed him every time. Or at least, I wanted to. Because confronting the truth, that this was becoming less of a marriage and more of a business arrangement, was a reality I wasn't ready to face. The arrival of our son, Jack, was supposed to be the happiest time in our lives, but it quickly turned into one of the most challenging. Michael was often away on business trips, leaving me to juggle the baby, household duties, and my own work. I wasn't just riding the emotional roller coaster of a new mom, I was doing it pretty much on my own. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of balancing Jack on my hip while trading on my laptop, I broached a topic that had been weighing on me. "Michael, I was thinking, maybe we could get a little help? Like a nanny?" I suggested tentatively over dinner. Michael, who had just returned from a trip to Chicago, looked up from his plate, eyebrows raised. "A nanny? Sarah, come on, we agreed you'd handle home stuff. Jack needs his mom, not some stranger." "But I'm also trying to work, Michael. The trading doesn't just happen by itself, and it's our livelihood too," I countered, feeling the frustration bubble up inside. "You're doing fine. What, you want a medal for doing what you're supposed to do?" His tone was dismissive, and it stung more than I expected. "You knew what you were signing up for. I'm out earning, you're home with the kid. We're both doing our parts, right?" As weeks turned into months, the financial strain began to show. Michael stopped transferring money to our joint account, leaving me to handle all the expenses, the taxes on the house, the car payments, groceries, clothes, everything for Jack. It wasn't just the physical toll, the financial juggle was becoming a nightmare. One night, after paying the latest batch of bills and realizing my account was running dangerously low, I confronted Michael. He had just come back from another trip and was in a surly mood. "Michael, the joint account is dry. I had to use my savings to cover everything these last few months. When can you transfer some money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He scoffed, tossing his keys on the table. "Oh, come on, Sarah. You live in my house, drive my car, and you're still complaining? You should be grateful." "Grateful? Michael, I am managing everything here while you're gone. I'm not asking for thanks, but I need support," I said, my voice rising in frustration. "Look, I'm dealing with a lot right now. The business needs every penny." "You're not the only one with pressures, Sarah," he retorted before heading off to the shower, effectively ending the conversation. It was clear I was on my own. I couldn't rely on Michael. I needed to ensure financial security for myself and Jack. That's when I threw myself into stock trading more seriously. Each day, after Jack fell asleep, I'd stay up, researching and making trades. Slowly, my account began to grow, bolstered by a series of successful deals. Keeping this a secret from Michael felt wrong, but necessary. He had made it clear that his money was his. Well, mine would be mine. I set up a separate account he didn't know about, moving my trading profits there. It was the only slice of independence I felt I could cling to. Jack was growing up fast, and with him, the daily logistics were becoming more complicated. The old car we had was barely hanging on, not nearly spacious enough for his stroller and all the paraphernalia that seemed necessary whenever we stepped out the door. One morning, while Michael was sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, I brought up the topic. "I need a new car, Michael. The trunk in this one just isn't cutting it for Jack's stuff." He didn't look up from his screen. "And you're telling me this why? Planning to make me pay for it?" "No, I've got it covered. I've been saving up from trading," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. That got his attention. His eyes narrowed as he put down his phone. "Oh, you've got money, huh? Well, that's great because I need some cash. The business could use a boost right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Again with the money? What about the money I lent you before? You promised to pay that back, and you haven't." I need a car for Jack, not to sink more into your endless business needs. He shrugged, a smirk forming. Business is what keeps us living in style, Sarah. You should know that by now. Help me out, and I'll get you a new car later. I stood my ground this time. No, Michael, no more. I need to take care of our son. I'm buying the car with or without your help. For a moment, he looked shocked, like he couldn't believe I was defying him. Then his expression hardened. Fine, how about this? If you're so set on this path, maybe we shouldn't be together. You want to split? Because trust me, you won't get a dime in the divorce. Remember that prenup you signed? His words were like a slap. I knew the prenup was there, but his threat to use it so bluntly was still a shock. If that's how you see our marriage, then maybe a divorce is the best thing, I said quietly, the reality of our crumbling relationship hitting me all at once. Fine by me. But remember, you leave with what you came with, nothing. And you'll need to find a new place to live. Consider this your 3-day notice, he said coldly, pulling out a drawer and tossing the prenuptial agreement on the table between us. I glanced at the document, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. You think you can just throw me and Jack out like we're nothing? I've been here through everything, supporting you, never asking for anything more than what I put into this family. He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. You think any of that matters? I've got the best lawyers. Don't try to fight me, Sarah. You'll lose. And don't think about taking anything from here, or I'll sue. Packing was a blur of tears and determination. I collected mine and Jack's belongings, leaving behind everything that Michael could claim as his. I wasn't going to give him any reason to come after me legally. The apartment I found was small, but it was ours, and it was close to Jack's kindergarten, which made life a little easier. Every day, as I walked him to school, I felt a bit more grounded, a bit more like I could do this, raise my son and rebuild our lives. The stock market became my sanctuary and my battlefield. I traded with a ferocity born of necessity, the need to provide for Jack and keep us afloat without any help from Michael. Nights were the hardest, after Jack went to bed and the world quieted down. That's when the doubts and the loneliness crept in. But every time I wanted to give in to despair, I'd look at the numbers climbing in my account, and I'd find the strength to keep pushing. Divorce proceedings were as cold and swift as Michael's farewell. The prenuptial agreement held up, leaving me with nothing but child support, which was a pittance compared to what Michael made. He fought dirty, too, throwing around threats to take Jack if I pushed for any of the money I'd lent him for that so-called urgent loan. It was during one of those mornings, dropping Jack off at kindergarten, that I met Laura. She was the mother of Emily, a little girl with a wild mop of curls and a laugh that could light up a room. Laura and I hit it off immediately, often finding ourselves chatting long after the kids had scampered off to their morning activities. One sunny afternoon, as we watched our kids play, Laura turned to me, her expression curious. You always seem so together, Sarah. How do you do it? I mean, I struggle, and it's just me. I shrugged, my eyes on Jack, who was busy constructing a sandcastle. I guess you just learn to cope, you know? Keep pushing through. We'd talk about everything and nothing, movies, books, our wild dreams of vacations in exotic places. But I never brought up Michael or the divorce. That part of my life was locked away, a chapter one was determined to close. One day, as we watched Jack and Emily scramble up the steps of a slide, Laura nudged me gently. You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Us single moms have to stick together. I smiled, the warmth from her offer spreading through me. Thanks, Laura. That means a lot. After a particularly good day on the stock exchange, I felt a rare surge of optimism. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the win, or maybe I just needed a change of scenery from the usual routine. Whatever it was, I called up Laura and suggested dinner at a new restaurant downtown. Sounds like a celebration is in order. What's the occasion? Laura asked as we settled into our seats at the chic, softly lit venue. Just a good day at work, I replied, trying to keep it casual, but inside I was buzzing. It felt like things were finally looking up. As we sipped on our drinks and chatted about mundane things like kindergarten antics and weekend plans, I felt the weight of the past months lighten a bit. But just as I was beginning to relax, a familiar voice chilled the air around us. Well, if it isn't Sarah. Looking a bit rough, aren't we? Michael's voice was unmistakable. I looked up to see him standing there, smirking, with a woman clinging to his arm. I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger. Michael, I greeted stiffly, wishing the earth would swallow me whole. And this is Vanessa, my fiancée. Isn't she just stunning? Vanessa gave a tight-lipped smile, eyeing me up and down with thinly veiled disdain. Yes, Michael always did have a taste for, well, never mind. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Michael leaned in, lowering his voice, though not his malice. Seriously, Sarah, you look like you've aged a decade. What happened to you? I remained silent, not trusting myself to speak without my voice shaking. Laura, however, was not about to let it slide. Sarah's doing just fine, better even. Looks to me like life's treating her well. Michael snorted, giving me a final sneering look before turning away. Come on, Vanessa, let's leave the past where it belongs. After they left, Laura turned to me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. What was that all about? He's awful. And who talks like that? Taking a deep breath, I filled her in on the brief version of my marriage, the high hopes, the prenup, the threats, the fallout. Everything spilled out in a low, hurried stream. Laura's eyes widened with every detail. Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were dealing with all that? And a prenup? I'm a family lawyer, you know. I want to see that prenup. There could be something there, some way to challenge it. A few days later, I was in Laura's office, handing over the dusty documents that had sealed my fate. She pored over them with a furrowed brow, her pen flying over the pages as she made notes. Sarah, there are several issues here, she finally said, looking up from the papers. First, this was signed too close to the wedding. It's a pressure tactic. Second, you didn't have independent legal advice, which is huge. And third, he didn't disclose all his financial obligations, like that loan you ended up covering. That's misrepresentation. My heart raced as she laid out each point. It means, Laura continued with a smile, that we might just be able to challenge this. We've got a real shot here, Sarah. Sitting in the cold, stark courtroom, my hands were trembling, despite my best efforts to appear calm. The weight of what was at stake pressed heavily upon me, not just the potential financial outcome, but the deeper, more personal vindication against Michael's long-standing control and threats. Before the judge had even called the session to order, Michael leaned towards me from where he stood a few paces away. His voice was low, a venomous whisper meant only for me. You're a loser, Sarah. You can never beat me. I'll ruin you. And when I'm done, I'll take Jack from you too. Laura, standing by my side, gave my hand a quick, reassuring squeeze before we were called to present our case. As the proceedings began, Laura was methodical and fierce. She laid out the facts, pointing to the rushed nature of the prenuptial agreement signing and the glaring lack of independent legal counsel. She highlighted the financial disclosures that Michael had conveniently omitted, which directly impacted the terms of the prenup. Your Honor, the agreement my client was coerced into signing was not only unfair but fundamentally flawed in its execution, Laura argued passionately. We have clear grounds here to question its validity. Michael's lawyer tried to counter, arguing that everything had been above board, that I was merely having regrets after the fact. But Laura dismantled his points with precise legal references and the undeniable weight of evidence she'd compiled. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. After reviewing the evidence and the circumstances under which the prenuptial agreement was signed, I am ruling to annul the agreement due to significant violations in its execution. The courtroom seemed to spin for a moment. Laura turned to me, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. We did it, Sarah, she whispered. Michael's reaction was instantaneous. His face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before as he stood up, his chair clattering behind him. "This isn't over. You won't get a dime from me," he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The judge warned him to settle down, but Michael's fury was palpable. As we left the courthouse, he followed, his threats spewing out like venom. I turned on my dictaphone and let it record every bitter word, every promise of revenge. "You'll regret this, Sarah. I'll make sure of it," he hissed as we walked down the courthouse steps. Later, at the police station, I played the recording. An officer took notes, his expression growing increasingly concerned with each threat uttered. "We'll give him a warning. He's not to contact you or approach you. Any further incidents, and we'll take more serious action," he promised. As I left the police station, the legal documents confirming my ownership of 2 city center apartments and several commercial properties securely in my bag, I felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Over $2 million in assets, it was almost impossible to comprehend. But more than the financial security, it was the freedom from Michael's shadow that felt like my true victory. The passive income from renting out real estate was more than enough to provide for Jack and me, and it allowed me to cut back on the frantic trading that had consumed so much of my time. These days, I spend a lot more time with Jack. He's growing up fast, and every moment with him feels precious. We often visit the park, and I watch him play, his laughter mingling with the breeze. One sunny afternoon, as Jack played on the swings, Laura joined us, her daughter Emily in tow. She plopped down on the bench next to me, a smile spreading across her face. "You look good, Sarah. Really good. Like a weight's been lifted," she observed, handing me a cup of coffee she'd picked up on her way. "Thanks, Laura. It feels that way, too," I replied, taking a grateful sip of the coffee. "I'm thinking about buying a house, you know, a real home for Jack and me. Something with a garden, maybe even a place for a dog." As we talked, the conversation shifted to Michael and how dramatically things had changed. Laura kept up with the legal community grapevine, which had plenty to say about my ex-husband's downfall. Word is, Michael's not doing so well. His new fiancée, Vanessa, left him, and a lot of his business partners have pulled back. They don't want to be associated with his reputation after the trial, Laura said, not hiding her disdain. I nodded, not surprised, but relieved I was no longer part of that drama. "I heard about Vanessa. Can't say I'm surprised she didn't stick around. Michael's true colors are hard to live with." The idea of Michael's downfall didn't bring me joy, but there was a sense of justice in seeing someone who had done so much harm finally face the consequences of his actions. I was just glad to be out of the storm and into calmer waters. Our conversation drifted to lighter topics, upcoming school events, vacation plans, and community activities. Normal life stuff, the kind I had longed for during all those tumultuous years. Later that day, after Emily and Laura had left, Jack and I walked home, his small hand in mine. "Mom, can we really get a dog?" he asked, his eyes wide with hope. "Yeah, buddy, we can." I smiled down at him. "We'll have a big yard for him to play in, and you can help pick him out." Jack's excitement was infectious, and as we talked about what kind of dog we might get, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the new life we were able to build. It was a far cry from the uncertainty and strife of the past years. I no longer looked over my shoulder, worried about what Michael might do next. Instead, I looked forward, to house viewings, to Jack's laughter filling a home that was truly ours, to new memories made in a garden under the sun, and to the simple joy of picking out our new dog. My name's Anna. I sell houses, the big fancy ones with views, and the small cozy types that feel like yesterday's bread, warm and welcoming. My office is way up in the sky, or so it feels on the 22nd floor. It's a world of glass that reflects everything, the clouds, the birds, and the infinite hustle of the city. So, here's where it all starts. There's this guy, Mike. Not just any guy. The type that walks into a room and even the air takes notice. He started working at the firm next door about a year ago. The first time we met was by the coffee machine. It's one of those fancy ones that can do everything except drink the coffee for you. I was fighting with the machine, trying to get it to give me something strong enough to keep my eyelids from staging a protest. Need a hand? That was Mike. Smiling, like he knew the secret joke behind every little malfunction. Yeah, unless you know how to negotiate with a robot, I snapped back, more out of caffeine deprivation than any real annoyance. He laughed, that easy kind of laugh that's infectious. Let me try. These things are more sensitive than my mom's chihuahua. He fiddled a bit, pushed some buttons like he was playing an arcade game, and voila, the machine surrendered 2 cups of the darkest brew. Mike, he said, handing me one. Anna. Thanks, I replied, taking a sip. Heaven in a cup and just the jolt I needed. We started bumping into each other more. Coffee breaks turned into little chats about this and that. He was easy to talk to. He had a way of listening that made you want to tell him stuff you'd think was duller than watching paint dry. One day, we grabbed lunch together at a little cafe just a block away from our buildings. It was becoming a thing, us, talking. About work, movies, the mess of the world. You ever think about doing something else? Like, not selling houses? He asked once, picking at his sandwich like it was a puzzle. Nah, I shrugged. It's in my blood. Plus, I get a kick out of making people's dreams come true. What about you? Ever think of running away and joining the circus? He chuckled, shaking his head. Can't. My mom would miss me too much. There it was. Mike was a mama's boy. Not in a living in her basement playing video games way, but close. He lived with her, took care of her. Hell, she even came to his office sometimes, like she was checking in on her investment. I thought it was sweet. A bit odd, maybe, but sweet. I liked that he cared so much. It was rare. Life at the office and with Mike was like rolling with a fast current, and before I knew it, a year had whisked by. The casual lunches and coffee breaks had woven into something a lot tighter, a lot more serious. One Friday, the office was buzzing more than usual. Word gets around when something's up, and around here, it spreads faster than a wildfire. I was plugging away at my desk when Liz, a coworker from 2 cubicles down, strutted over like she had some hot gossip. Hey, Anna, everyone's saying he's gonna pop the question soon. You know, a ring, the whole shebang. She smirked, popping her gum. Let him talk, I shrugged, trying to brush it off, but my heart was racing. Mike hadn't hinted anything, but the thought sent a zing through my spine. Later that day, as the sun dipped below the horizon painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple, Mike suggested we grab dinner instead of just a quick bite at the cafe. Something about the way he said it, all nervous-like, had my stomach doing somersaults. We ended up at this cozy little Italian place he knew, tucked away from the usual hustle of the city. It was the kind of spot you'd miss if you weren't looking for it, with dim lighting and candles flickering on the tables. The conversation flowed easy, but I could tell Mike was edgy. He fumbled with his napkin, cleared his throat more times than needed, and kept avoiding eye contact. So, Anna, he finally started, his voice a bit shaky. We've been doing this, us, for a while now, and I... Spit it out, Mike. You're killing me here, I cut in, half joking, half dying inside. He chuckled, that nervous sort of laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Then, he took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and slid a small box across the table towards me. I want to do this for real, Anna. Marry me? The room spun a little. I mean, Liz's teasing, the office bets, suddenly, it was all real. But looking into Mike's hopeful eyes, I felt the solid, sure thing settle in my chest. Yeah, Mike. Yes. I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He grinned, relief washing over his face, and slipped the ring on my finger. It was simple, nothing too flashy, just like us. We spent the rest of the evening wrapped up in our little bubble, the chatter around us fading into a blur. The next week at work was like walking onto a stage. Heads turned, whispers followed me down the hall, and even the old-timers slapped Mike on the back and threw him knowing looks. And amid all the congratulations and cheeky comments, the bets came up again. Liz, with her big mouth, couldn't help herself. Gotta say, Anna, didn't think you'd say yes. What's the over-under on this lasting then? She laughed, nudging me. I rolled my eyes. Place your bets, Liz. But we're in this for the long haul. Hear that, folks? She's confident. Might want to reconsider your stakes, Liz announced to the room, which earned a round of laughter and more playful bets. But it was all noise. In that whirlwind of a moment, with a new ring on my finger and Mike by my side, the office could have fallen down around us, and I wouldn't have cared. We were doing this, and that's all that mattered. Our wedding was nothing fancy, just close friends and family in a small garden downtown. It was perfect, simple, intimate, and just about us. However, the real challenge started when we were supposed to set up our new life together. As we were packing up my apartment, Mike dropped the bomb. Anna, I've been thinking. Mom and I have been living alone in this rented house since Dad passed. She won't feel good alone without me. What do you think about moving in with her? It could save us a ton on rent and bills. I sighed. It wasn't what I wanted, but how could I say no? He was right, his mom had been alone a lot. Okay, let's give it a try, I conceded, trying to sound more upbeat than I felt. Moving day was a blur. His mom, Martha, welcomed us with open arms and an endless list of how things were done in her house. At first, it was fine. I thought, I can handle this. It's temporary. But as days turned into weeks, the true colors of living under Martha's roof began to show. She had rules for everything, from how laundry should be done to how the groceries should be stored. One evening, we were setting the table for dinner when she cornered me in the kitchen. Anna, you need to start taking more responsibility around here. It's tradition for the daughter-in-law to handle the household, she stated firmly, her eyes pinning me in place. I was chopping vegetables, my hand stilling for a moment. Martha, I work full-time, just like Mike. I'm happy to help, but we should split the chores equally. Mike walked in just then, and I looked to him for support. He was silent for a moment, then shrugged. Mom's got a point, Anna. It's how she's always done things. Can't we just try it her way? His words stung. I felt betrayed. How could he not see how unfair this was? 6 months in, the situation hadn't improved. If anything, it got worse. Martha started talking about moving to a bigger, more modern house. Anna, you're in real estate. Start looking for something nice for us, a place where we can all live comfortably, she'd say, flipping through house listings. I tried to explain as gently as I could. Martha, we really can't afford a new house right now. It's not just about finding a place, it's about being able to maintain it financially. She would wave off my concerns. Nonsense. You'll find a good deal. You're good at your job, aren't you? The pressure was mounting, and I felt trapped. I remembered the office bets about how long my marriage would last. It seemed everyone expected it to crumble. Determined not to give them that satisfaction, I gritted my teeth and bore it, hoping for a change. Just when I thought things couldn't get more chaotic, Mike's sister, Jen, showed up at our doorstep, tears streaming down her face, a toddler on her hip. The door barely swung open before she was halfway through it, her voice cracking with panic. He kicked me out, Mike. He's done with me, said I cheated, which I didn't. She sobbed, collapsing into the hallway. Mike, ever the family man, wrapped an arm around her, guiding her to the living room. It's okay, Jen. You can stay here as long as you need, he assured her. I stood there, mouth slightly open, trying to process another bombshell. As they settled down, I pulled Mike aside, my voice low. Mike, this house is already packed. Maybe it's time we found our own place? He shook his head, his brows knitting together. Anna, come on, this is temporary. Just until Jen gets back on her feet. We can handle this. Handle this? It was like every day added another weight I wasn't sure I could carry. But I nodded, resigning myself to the new reality. The next weeks were a blur of chaos. Jen, bless her, was dealing with a lot, but that meant all her responsibilities fell to me. I'd come home from a long day at work to a house turned upside down by her 2-year-old whirlwind, Tommy. Toys everywhere, food splatters on the walls, you name it, Tommy did it. It felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. The final straw came at dinner a few nights later. We were all sitting around the table, a tense silence hanging over us as we picked at our food. That's when Martha, with her usual flair for stirring the pot, dropped her next idea. You know, Anna, you're out working all day, and clearly, the house is suffering for it. My friend's daughter, Lisa, she's looking for a job as an au pair. Maybe you should hire her to help out, she suggested, like she was doing me a favor. Yeah? And who's paying for this au pair? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Martha smiled, a thin, knowing smile. Well, you are, of course. You're the one with the job. I glanced at Mike, hoping for some support, but he just focused on his plate, silent. Something inside me snapped. Fine, if hiring this girl meant less time at this madhouse, then so be it. All right, Martha. Have her come by tomorrow. We'll talk. I conceded, pushing my plate away, appetite gone. Lisa started the next day. She was a sweet girl, early 20s, and good with Tommy, which was a relief. She cooked, she cleaned, and the house seemed calmer. But it wasn't long before I noticed the giggles, the lingering look she shared with Mike when she thought I wasn't looking. One night, after I saw her touch his arm, laughing at something he said, I confronted him. Do you think it's appropriate, the way Lisa acts around you? I asked, my voice tight. Mike just chuckled, waving my concerns away like they were flies. Anna, you're being ridiculous. She's just a kid, and I've known her since she was in diapers. Don't be jealous. Jealous? Was I? Or was it just the final wear down of living in a house where I felt more like an outsider than a family member? I shook my head, trying to push away the nagging doubts. All right, Mike. If you say so, I replied, but the seed of unease had already been planted. Living in a crowded house with your in-laws is like walking on eggshells, you never know which step will crack. But worse than the thin ice was the creeping realization that things were amiss. At first, it was a 20 here, a 50 there. Small change, maybe misplaced. Then it was earrings, a bracelet my grandma gave me. That kind of stuff doesn't just walk away. One evening, after noticing my favorite watch was gone, I confronted Lisa, the au pair. Lisa, have you seen a silver watch around? It's missing. She gave me a wide-eyed innocent look. Oh no, Anna, I haven't seen anything. Maybe it's lost? Enough was enough. I installed hidden cameras in my room, a desperate move for desperate times. I wasn't going to accuse anyone without proof. But what I found blew the lid off any petty theft. It was a Wednesday, the kind of day where you just can't face going home. I sat in a cafe, laptop open, pretending to work, but really, I was watching the live feed from the camera. What I saw crushed me. Jen, Mike's sister, snuck into our room. She went straight for the drawer where I kept my jewelry, her movements too practiced. My heart sank. Then, the door opened again, it was Mike and Lisa. They weren't just chatting. No, they were, together. On our bed. It felt like a punch to the gut. I sat there, the taste of my coffee turning bitter. Anger boiled up, but a cold, calculating part of me pushed it down. No, I wasn't going to storm home. I needed a plan. Over the next few days, I collected every shred of evidence. Videos, times, everything. But revenge? That needed to be sweet, not hasty. One day, accidentally leaving my laptop open on a real estate listing was part of the play. It was a beautiful house, big yard, underpriced by half. Mike walked by, stopped, and stared at the screen. What's this? He asked, eyes lighting up. Oh, just some listing I found. Too bad we're not looking, huh? I murmured, feigning disinterest. He grabbed the laptop, scrolling through the photos. Are you kidding? This is perfect. Why wouldn't we look at this? Martha came over, peering over his shoulder. Oh, Mike. It's beautiful. Call them, now. Mike was practically bouncing as he dialed the number. Hi, yes, I'm calling about the listing. Yes, we want to put down a deposit. No need for a full check, we trust it's all good, he said, all but throwing our money at them. Who's it going to be registered to? I asked, my voice sweet as syrup. Me, obviously. And you'll help with the payments, right? He didn't even look at me as he spoke. Of course, I replied, my smile hiding daggers. Everything was falling into place. Sitting back, I watched as they celebrated, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Mike, Martha, and Jen, they all thought they had won. But the game had just changed, and I was now playing for keeps. The ink was barely dry on the documents for the new house when Mike decided to throw a dinner that felt more like a victory lap than a family gathering. The entire crew was there, his mom, Martha, his sister, Jen, and yes, Lisa, who'd become too familiar in all the wrong ways. The dining room buzzed with a kind of giddy tension as I walked in, the air thick with smug satisfaction. Mike was grinning like a kid who'd just gotten away with stealing cookies. All right, everyone, big news, Mike announced, standing at the head of the table with a glass of wine in hand. We're moving into the new house next week. Mom, Jen, and, of course, Lisa here will be coming with me. Anna and I, well, Anna won't be joining us. Martha clapped her hands, almost bouncing in her chair. Here are the divorce papers. I think Lisa suits my son better. You should leave here, right now. I took the envelope without a word, my hand steady as I pulled out the papers. I looked around the table, at their expectant faces, waiting for me to break, to make a scene. But I didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I signed each page, each signature a silent seal on my exit from this twisted soap opera. I stood up, my chair scraping back loudly in the quiet that followed. Enjoy the house, I said, my tone even, a small smile playing on my lips. I walked out with my head held high, their laughter echoing behind me. They thought they'd won, but the game was far from over. A week after I'd moved out, living in a small but peaceful apartment, I got a call from Sarah, a friend who lived near the new dream home. Hey, you won't believe what's happening, Sarah's voice was a mix of concern and disbelief. Your ex and his circus moved into the house, and now there's a major stink, literally. The whole neighborhood is complaining. Oh? What's going on? I asked, a knowing smile creeping across my face. It's the sewage, Anna. Something's wrong with their pipes, sewage is leaking out onto the street. It's a disaster. They've had plumbers in all day. The news was a delicious twist I hadn't anticipated so soon. They're in deep, you know. Mike's trying to sort it, but he's out of his depth. No money to fix it properly. Sarah continued, her voice almost sympathetic. As I hung up, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. The perfect house, the perfect scam. The victory they thought they had was crumbling, just like the pipes in their precious new home. And as for me? I was finally free, breathing air that smelled a lot sweeter than the one surrounding them. After signing those divorce papers, it wasn't just a matter of packing up my old life, but gearing up for a battle. First thing, I met with a lawyer, Mr. Davidson, a no-nonsense guy with a reputation for being a bulldog in court. I laid out everything, hidden camera footage, dates, times, the works. Mr. Davidson, scanning through the evidence with keen eyes, finally looked up, his expression grim yet oddly satisfied. Anna, we have a solid case here. Infidelity, theft, you want to go to court, you'll likely seek compensation. That's exactly what I want, I told him, my voice steady, my resolve like steel. We filed for financial compensation for the betrayal and initiated a police complaint against Jen for theft. The days that followed were a blur of legal documents, meetings, and statements. Amidst this whirlwind, word got out about the divorce and everything else. I braced for whispers, for pity, or worse, mockery at work. But it never came. Instead, there was an unexpected wave of support. But not everyone was supportive. One afternoon, as I was walking out of a meeting, I saw her, Martha, storming into the office like it was her own house, fury radiating off her in waves. "Anna, you think you can just destroy my family and get away with it?" she screamed across the lobby. The office fell silent. Everyone's eyes were on us. I stood my ground. "Martha, you need to leave. Now." She took a step forward, her finger pointed accusingly. "I won't let you do this to us." Before she could continue, I gestured to the security guards. "Please escort her out. She's not welcome here." The guards were quick to react, taking Martha by the arms and leading her away as she continued to shout and struggle. It was a sad, desperate scene. The following weeks saw the legal battles unfold. Mike, faced with undeniable evidence, settled out of court, agreeing to a lump sum as compensation. His face, when he signed the papers, was a mix of anger and humiliation. Jen, caught red-handed on video, received a conditional sentence and was ordered to return all stolen items. Adding to their downfall, Mike became a joke at work. People would subtly lift their noses as he passed, snickering about the man from the stinky house. It wasn't long before he couldn't take it anymore and resigned. His departure made my daily life a lot easier. Not seeing him every day was a relief I hadn't expected. It had been 2 quiet, peaceful months since I had settled into my new life and small apartment in the city center. My days were filled with the normalcy of work, occasional lunches with colleagues, and evenings that I could now call my own. It felt like I was finally getting back to myself, the air around me lighter, my mornings brighter. But, like a shadow from the past, my phone rang one afternoon. The screen flashed Martha's name, dragging with it the weight of old, unpleasant memories. I hesitated but answered, curious despite myself. "Anna, you need to help us." Martha's voice came through, strained and desperate. It was so different from the last time we spoke, filled with accusations and anger. "What's wrong, Martha?" I asked, though a part of me already wanted to hang up. "It's this house. It's falling apart. The smell is unbearable, and we can't even use the bathrooms properly because of the sewage issues. Mike's drowning in debt because of the repairs," she explained, her voice cracking. I paused, taking in her words. The schadenfreude was tempting, but I pushed it aside. "Martha, Mike chose that house. He refused a proper inspection. What did you expect?" "But, Anna, we didn't know. His girlfriend left him, and Jen, she's gone too, ran off with some guy, leaving her son behind. We're struggling," she continued, pleading now. I sighed, the old anger and frustration stirring in my chest. "Martha, Mike made his decision without thinking of the consequences. You all supported him then. I'm sorry, but you're on your own." I hung up before she could say anything else, cutting off the last thread that connected me to that part of my life. As I set my phone down, a wave of emotions washed over me. Pity, relief, liberation, it was a mix that left me both saddened and strangely empowered. I had moved on, literally and metaphorically. My new apartment, though smaller, was mine alone. I decorated it to my taste, filled it with plants, and every corner of it was stamped with my presence, my independence. That evening, I stepped out onto my small balcony, overlooking the bustling city streets. The air was crisp, and the city lights flickered like distant stars. It was my city, my life. I had fought hard for this peace, and I intended to enjoy every bit of it. Never again, I whispered to myself, a promise hanging in the cool air. Never again will I let anyone control my life. I turned back inside, feeling the solid ground of my decisions beneath my feet. The apartment was quiet, a sanctuary from the world and its chaos. It was a fresh start, a new chapter that I was writing on my own terms.